Emma Rose Whitaker set her suitcase down in the middle of the road, and she did not pick it back up. The man who had promised to marry her had just handed it to her in front of the whole town of Red Hollow. "I'm sorry," Thomas Bell said. "This won't work." Emma looked at him for a long, level moment. "I crossed 1,100 miles on your word." "I know." "Then say it loud enough that they all hear it." And he did. If you love stories like this one, take a second and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. Stay with me all the way to the end and leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story has traveled. The stagecoach had come in at 2:15 in the afternoon, and half of Red Hollow had come out to see it. That was the part Emma would remember longest. Not the heat, not the dust, the audience. She had counted the days on the inside cover of her father's Bible. 41 days from the letter that said come. 9 days on trains. 2 days on a coach with a broken spring that beat her spine like a drum. And in all that time, in all those miles, she had built one single picture in her head, and she had kept it clean and kept it whole, the way a person keeps a candle burning through a long night. A man waiting. A hand offered. A porch somewhere with her name on it. She stepped down, and the picture broke. Thomas Bell was younger than she'd expected, and better dressed. New coat. Boots that had never worked a day. He'd been smiling when the coach door opened. He stopped smiling. "Emma." "Yes, sir." He looked at her hands. Emma had grown up with her hands. They'd pulled calves in February, and mended tack by lamplight and gone into the mouths of colicky horses at 3 in the morning. There were 2 white scars across the back of the right one from a wire fence in a hailstorm when she was 19. She watched him find those scars, and she felt something in her chest go quiet and cold. "You wrote that you were a rancher's daughter," Thomas said. "I am. I took that to mean—" He stopped. "Say it." "I took that to mean your father owned a ranch." He did. 400 acres and a note at the bank that outlived him. Emma kept her chin level. "I never wrote one word to you that wasn't true, Mr. Bell." Somebody in the crowd laughed, not loud, just enough. Thomas heard it, and Emma saw the exact second the laugh got inside him and did its work. He straightened his coat. He glanced at the men standing outside the mercantile, and she understood right then that whatever he was about to say next, he was not saying it to her. "I need a wife," he said, "not another hired hand." The street went quiet. Emma stood in the middle of it with her suitcase in her fist and 1,100 miles in her legs, and she made herself breathe. That's a hard thing to say to a woman in front of her whole new town. "I'm being honest." "No," she said. "Honest was your letters. This here is convenient." Thomas's ears went red. He took the suitcase out of her hand, and for one foolish half-second she thought he meant to carry it, and then he pressed it back into her palm and folded her fingers around the handle like a man returning something he'd found in the road. "I'm sorry. This won't work. Mr. Bell." Her voice didn't shake. She was proud of that for the rest of her life. "What do you expect me to do?" "There's a coach east on Thursday." "It's Saturday." "Then I expect you'll want to make arrangements." He turned and walked away. Nobody moved. 20-some people stood in that street, and not one of them moved. Emma looked at their faces one at a time, slow, and she watched every single one of them find something else to look at. She walked. She didn't cry, and she didn't hurry, and she didn't set the suitcase down again because she had learned young that the moment you set a thing down in front of people, they decide you can't carry it. A strong person can lose everything and still stand. Her father dying in a bed that smelled of camphor. Emma rose. "You hear me still stand?" "Yes, sir," she said out loud to nobody on the street of a town that had just watched her get returned like a parcel. "I hear you." The hotel clerk was a thin man named Pyle, who wouldn't meet her eyes. $2 the night, ma'am." "I have $1.60. "Then I got a problem, ma'am." "I'll work it. I can cook, I can wash, I can shoe a horse if you've got a forge." "We ain't hiring." "I'm not asking to be hired. I'm asking to be even." Pyle finally looked up. There was something in his face that might have been shame and might have been nothing at all. Mr. Bell holds paper on this building, he said. Emma set her hand flat on the counter. Say that again. He holds paper, Pyle said quieter. Him and the Land and Water Company. Half this street, ma'am. I got 4 children. So I'm to sleep in the road so your children can sleep in beds. I'm real sorry. You keep saying that word. Emma picked up her case. In this town, it don't seem to cost anybody a thing. She tried the boarding house. Hattie Mercer met her on the step, with her arms folded and her mouth already set. I know who you are. Then you know I've had a poor day. I know Thomas Bell says you come out here under false colors. He's had an hour, Emma said, and he's already got a story. He says you told him you had money. I told him I had nothing, and I'd work like a mule beside him for whatever we could build. I have the letter I wrote. I'll read it to you standing right here in your doorway if you want it. For a moment, Hattie's arms loosened. Then, a wagon rolled past, and a woman inside it called out, "Evening, Hattie," in a voice like a hand on a leash, and Hattie's arms folded right back up. "No rooms," she said. "Ma'am, no rooms." The door shut. Emma stood on the step and let herself feel it, all of it, for exactly as long as it took to count to 10. Then she went and found the church. The Reverend Abel Prine was a soft, worried man who wouldn't let her in the sanctuary, but brought her a cup of water on the step and wrung his hands the whole time she drank it. "There's the mission at Bozeman," he said. "In the spring, perhaps. It's July." "Yes." "Reverend." She handed the cup back. "Do you believe what you preach?" "Aye, of course." "Then which part of it are you doing right now?" He had no answer for that, and to his credit, he didn't pretend to. The storm came off the mountains a little after 7. Emma got herself under the overhang of the freight office and stood her suitcase up out of the water and put her back against the wall, and for the first time in 1,100 miles she let her eyes fill. She didn't let them spill. There's a difference, and it mattered to her. She thought about her father's hands. She thought about the 400 acres and the auctioneer's voice. She thought about how a person can do everything right, every chore, every prayer, every honest word on every honest page, and still end up standing in the rain in a town that has already decided what she's worth. And then a voice came out of the dark behind her, deep and unhurried. "You shouldn't be standing out here alone." Emma turned fast and got her hand on the suitcase handle like it was a weapon. The man was big, tall through the shoulders, black hair to his collar, a heavy beard with gray coming into it at one corner of the jaw. Rain running off the brim of his hat. He didn't come any closer. He'd stopped a good 10 feet back, which she noticed and which she would think about later. "Mister, I've had my fill of men today. I expect you have." He took his hat off, which surprised her standing in a downpour. "Caleb Stone, ma'am. I've got a place up the valley." "Emma Whitaker." "I know it. Whole town knows it." His jaw worked. "That's the trouble with this town. You saw. I came in for salt and a wheel rim. I saw." Emma's voice came out harder than she meant. "And where were you standing, Mr. Stone, while he was handing me my case back?" He took that. He didn't flinch, and he didn't excuse it. "Behind the crowd," he said. "Too far back and too slow, and I've been chewing on it for 5 hours." "Well." She turned back toward the rain. "At least you're honest about your cowardice." "Yes, ma'am." That stopped her. She'd expected an argument. Men always argued. "You're not going to tell me it wasn't your business." "It was somebody's business," Caleb said. "That's the whole of it. Somebody in that street should have stepped forward and no one did, and I was somebody." The rain came harder. He put his hat back on. "There's a hotel," he said. "There is. They turn you out. Mr. Bell holds paper on it." Something moved across his face, then not surprise. Recognition. The look of a man hearing a bell he'd heard before. "Say that again." "The clerk said Mr. Bell and the Land and Water Company hold paper on half this street." Caleb Stone was quiet for a moment. "Ma'am," he said, "how long did that man write you letters?" Emma frowned. 7 months. "Why? How many letters?" 19. "You keep them." "What kind of question is that?" "An important one." I'm not in the habit, Emma said slowly, of answering important questions from strangers in the rain. Fair. He nodded once. Then here's the only thing I came to say. I've got a ranch 9 miles up. There's a house, a stove, and a roof that don't leak but in one corner. There's an old man named Ezra Cobb up there who's been cooking for me 11 years and can't hardly get up the porch steps anymore. You'd be doing me a service and I'd be paying you wages. Wages. Yes, ma'am. Not charity. I don't hand out charity, Caleb said. I never had enough of it to get in the habit. Emma studied him a long moment. Rain drummed the boards over their heads. Why? She said. You don't know me. I know what I watched today. Half this town watched it. They went in to supper. Then I reckon half this town has to sleep with it, he said. I'd rather not. That's not a reason. That's a conscience. Same thing most days. Emma's throat did something complicated. She looked down at her wet suitcase, and she thought about Thursday, and about the coach going east, and about arriving back in Nebraska, with nothing but the story of how she'd been sent away, and how that story would follow her the rest of her natural life. Mr. Stone. Ma'am. If I come up that mountain, I come to work, not to be rescued. I've been picked up and set down enough for one day. Wouldn't dream of it. And I'll want the wages counted out loud, so I know exactly what I'm owed. The corner of his mouth moved, the first thing close to a smile she'd seen from him. You always this hard to help. Mister. Emma said, I've had one good day in 6 years, and it wasn't this one. The ride up took 2 hours, and they didn't speak for most of it. She noticed that he rode slow so the wagon wouldn't jolt her. She noticed that when they hit the creek crossing, he put his hand out flat between them, not on her, just there in case. She noticed he never once asked her about Thomas Bell. Ezra Cobb met them at the door with a lamp and a face like a walnut. Well, he said. Ezra. Caleb. This is Miss Whitaker. She's taking over the cooking in the house. Ezra looked at Emma. Emma looked back. You know what to do with a Dutch oven, girl. I know what to do with a Dutch oven, an axe, a farrier's rasp, and a breech berth, Emma said. Which of them did you want first? Ezra started laughing, and then started coughing, and had to sit down on the step. Oh, I like her, he wheezed. Caleb, I like her. The trouble came at bedtime, the way trouble does. There was one bedroom. Emma had seen it from the front room, and hadn't said a word about it, and Caleb had been standing at the stove for 4 full minutes, not saying a word about it either, and finally he set down the coffee pot hard enough to rattle it. You take the bed. I'll take the floor by the stove. You'll take the bed. Mr. Stone, Miss Whitaker. He turned around. You've been on a train 9 days. You've been thrown out of a hotel and a boarding house and a church step in the same afternoon. You will take the bed. And where will you be? The barn. Same as I sleep half of July anyhow. Emma folded her arms. And come Monday, when a freight driver comes up this road and sees a woman's washing on your line, what does this valley say about me? Caleb went still. They'll say it, she pressed. You know they will. They said worse about me today, and I hadn't done anything at all. So don't stand there and tell me it don't signify. I have got exactly one thing left in this world, Mr. Stone, and it is my name, and I have been holding on to it with both hands since 2 o'clock this afternoon. The silence stretched out. When he spoke, his voice had dropped into something low and rough, and he took one step toward her, and it came out of him almost like a growl. Then hear me plain. In this valley, a woman who sleeps under a man's roof gets called things she can't ever wash off. So if you sleep in my bed, you wake up as my wife. That's not me wanting a thing from you. That's me telling you what it costs, and telling you I'll pay it before I'll let this valley do to you what that street did. Emma's breath went out of her. You don't mean that. I never say a thing I don't mean. It's near my only virtue. You'd marry a woman you met in the rain 8 hours ago. I'd marry her Monday morning in front of a preacher and put it in the county book so no man alive can say a word about her. His jaw set. And then I'd sleep in the barn every night after for as long as she wanted and never once ask her for anything different. That's the offer. It ain't romance. It's a roof and a name. Emma sat down slowly in the chair by the stove. Why? she said. "Why would you spend your name on a stranger?" Caleb was quiet a long moment. "Because I had somebody once," he said, "and this valley talked about her too after, and I was too young and too proud and too full of my own grief to stand up in the street and stop it. So I went up this mountain and I stayed here 11 years. He looked at her. "And today I stood behind a crowd and watched it start all over again on somebody else. I ain't doing that twice, ma'am, not in one lifetime." Emma sat with that. What was her name? Sarah. "I'm sorry. Long time ago." He picked up his hat. "Bed's yours. Door's got a bolt on the inside. I put it there myself. Use it if it lets you sleep." He was at the door when Emma spoke. "Mr. Stone." "Ma'am?" 19 letters, she said. "They're in my case tied with a blue string. Now tell me why a man asks about that before he asks about anything else." Caleb turned around slowly. "Because Thomas Bell can't write," he said. Emma stared at him. "That's not. He signs an X on a bill of sale. I've watched him do it at the stockyard 3 years running." Caleb's voice was flat. "So somebody else wrote you 19 letters, Miss Whitaker. And whoever it was, they went to considerable trouble to bring a woman out here with no family, no money, and no soul in the territory to speak for her." The stove ticked. "Why?" Emma whispered. "Why would anybody?" "That," Caleb said, "is what I've been chewing on for 5 hours." She did not sleep much. At some point past midnight, she lit the lamp and untied the blue string and spread all 19 letters across the quilt. And she read them the way she had never read them before, not as a woman being courted, but as a woman being worked. And she started to see it. The handwriting was fine, educated, not one blot in 19 pages. "My dear Miss Whitaker," and then buried in the middle of the 4th letter, casual as weather. "You will find the country here well watered, particularly the northwest quarter of Section 14, where the creek runs year-round, even in a dry summer." Section 14. Township. Range. Numbers she'd read right past 7 months ago because she'd been reading for the word love. In the 9th letter, "A wife's name upon a claim is a great convenience in this territory, and I shall want yours upon several." She'd thought it was tender. "I shall want yours." She'd read that line at her kitchen table in Nebraska and pressed her hand flat over it. Emma sat on the edge of that bed with 19 letters around her and felt the whole shape of it come down on her at once. She had not been jilted. She had been shipped. And then somewhere between the 11th and 12th letter, she found the thing that made her go cold all the way down. The 11th letter ended mid-sentence at the bottom of the page and picked up on a fresh sheet, and the fresh sheet had a printed letterhead someone had tried to trim off with a knife. Half a line of type survived along the top edge. "Red Hollow Land and Water. Co. H. Vance Pres." Emma was out the door and across the yard barefoot in her nightdress with a lamp in one hand and the letters in the other. "Mr. Stone." He came out of the barn, already pulling his suspenders up. "What's happened? Read that." She shoved the page at him. "Read the top of it." He read it. He read it twice. And Emma watched a man who had been polite and slow and careful for 6 straight hours turn into something else entirely. "Harlan Vance," he said. "Who is he?" "He's the man who's bought or broke every outfit in this valley in 4 years. Caleb folded the page with great care and handed it back. "He's tried 3 times to buy Stone Creek. Last time he came up here himself and sat at that table and told me a man alone on a mountain has to think about what happens if he takes sick. That's a threat. That's Harlan Vance." Caleb looked up the dark road. "Miss Whitaker, that paper in your hand is the first thing anybody in this county has ever had with his name and Bell's on the same page. Then he'll want it back." "Yes, ma'am." "He'll come. He surely will." Emma pressed the letters against her chest. "Well," she said, "let him." He came Tuesday, not Vance. Vance never came himself twice. He sent Dutch Kagan and 4 men, and they rode into the yard at mid-morning, while Emma had bread rising and Ezra was shelling peas on the step. Emma had a shotgun leaned inside the doorframe by then. Caleb hadn't told her to put it there. She'd just put it there. "Where's Stone?" Kagan said. "Up at the high pens." Emma stayed on the porch. "You'll want to come back." "We'll wait." "You'll wait down the road." Kagan smiled at her. He had a wide, easy, terrible smile. "You'd be the bride," he said. "The one nobody wanted." Emma felt it land. She felt every eye in that yard. And then she heard her own voice come out steady as a fence post. "I'd be the woman who's holding 19 letters from your employer," she said. "Would you like to talk about those, Mr. Kagan? Or would you like to talk about my wedding? Because I can go a good while on either." The smile came off his face like paint in the rain. "Give them here." "No." "Ma'am, you rode up here to frighten a woman," Emma said. "And you found one who got frightened out of everything she had 2 days ago, so you're a little late." She reached back and put her hand on the shotgun without lifting it. "Now, down the road." Ezra Cobb stood up off the step with his peas. And behind Kagan at the top of the yard, Caleb Stone said, "You heard the lady." He'd come down quiet. He had a rifle across the crook of his arm, not pointed just there, and he walked all the way through those 5 men to stand at the bottom of the porch steps with his back to Emma and his front to Kagan. "Dutch. Stone. You rode into my yard and spoke to a woman like that. Vance wants what she's got. Vance can want." Kagan's hand drifted. "You do that," Caleb said, "and there's 4 of you'll ride home and 1 of you won't, and Dutch, I've had 11 years up here with nothing to do but shoot. You want to test that arithmetic?" Nobody moved for 5 long seconds. Kagan turned his horse. At the gate he stopped and looked back, and he raised his voice so it carried. "Sunday," he said. "Mr. Vance says come to town Sunday, Stone. There's talk about you and that woman already. Whole valley's saying it." He grinned. "Belle's telling it real good. Says she come up here inside of 6 hours. Says a woman like that'll say anything about anybody, and won't nobody believe a word out of her mouth by Sunday." He rode out. Emma stood on the porch, and the bread went on rising, and nobody said anything at all. Then Caleb turned around. "He's not wrong," he said quietly. "That's the whole play. They don't have to get the letters. They just have to make sure that when you hold them up, not one soul in this county believes the woman holding them." "Then they've already won," Emma said. "I heard what that street sounded like Saturday." "No, ma'am." "Mr. Stone, there is one way to ruin it," Caleb said. "One. And you already know what it is, because I said it to you standing right there by that stove, and you've been chewing on it just like I have." Emma's hands were shaking. She put them behind her. "Say it plain. An unmarried woman on a mountain is a scandal," he said. "A man's wife defending her own husband's land is a citizen. They can't tell the story on a wife. It don't work. It don't sell." He held her eyes. "So I'll ask you once, and I'll ask it honest. And if you say no, I'll drive you to Bozeman myself Thursday and put money in your hand and never speak of it again. Ask it. Marry me Sunday." Emma's eyes stung. "For the land. For your name," Caleb said. "The land is mine to lose. Your name is the thing they're fixing to take, and I have watched this valley take a woman's name before, and I did nothing, and I have paid for that every single night for 11 years. And after you're Mrs. Stone, and you've got a house and a wage and a horse of your own, and if a year from now you want out, I'll stand up in front of a judge and swear it was my doing all of it, and you'll walk away clean." His voice roughened. "I ain't asking for your heart, Emma. I'm asking to stand between you and that street." She had crossed 1,100 miles to be somebody's wife. She had been handed her own suitcase in front of 26 people, and now a man she had known 4 days was offering her the thing she'd come for and asking her for nothing back, and she could not decide if it was the kindest thing she had ever heard or the loneliest. "Mr. Stone." "Ma'am." "When you say it," she said, "you call me Emma." "Emma." "Then yes." Sunday Red Hollow was full. Emma had known it would be. Vance had made sure of it. Kagan's men had spent 3 days telling every ranch in the valley that there'd be an accounting in town, and folks come out for an accounting the way they come out for a hanging. Thomas Bell was standing on the church steps when the wagon rolled in. "Well," he called, "look what the mountain sent back." And the crowd laughed. That same laugh. Emma heard it, and her whole body remembered Saturday. Caleb set the brake. Emma. I'm all right. You don't have to get down. Yes, I do, she said. If I don't get down here today, I'll be getting down here the rest of my life. She got down. Vance was there, of course, silver-haired Pleasant standing in the shade, with his hands folded like a man at a christening. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Belle said all of it for him. Reverend Belle's voice rang off the storefronts. Reverend Prine, you ought to hear this before you let him in your church. That woman's been living up at Stone Creek since Saturday night. 6 hours off the coach and up a mountain with a man she never met. He turned to the crowd warming playing it. Now I'm sorry for what I said in this street. I am. But I reckon I dodged something, and I reckon every one of you can see it plain. Hattie Mercer would not look at her. Pyle from the hotel wouldn't look at her. The Reverend Prine wrung his hands in the church door. Mr. Stone, Prine said miserably, is there truth in it? And Emma understood, standing in that dust with everything she had left, riding on the next 10 seconds that they were not going to believe a word she said. Not one. She could hold up 19 letters and a shotgun and the book itself, and they would look at her dress and her hands, and they would believe Thomas Bell, because believing Thomas Bell was easier and cost them nothing. She had lost before she opened her mouth. Then Caleb Stone stepped down off that wagon. He walked around the front of it slow, and the crowd went quiet, the way crowds do when a big man walks slow. He stopped in front of Thomas Bell. He took his hat off. Say her name, he said. What? You've said that woman 4 times. Say her name. Stone, I don't. Her name is Emma Rose Whitaker, Caleb said, and she come 1,100 miles on 19 letters that you never wrote to a man who can't write his own. And this whole street watched you hand her case back like she was a wrong order out of a catalog. The crowd stirred. That ain't... Bell's face went white. That ain't Reverend Prine. Caleb turned. You asked was there truth in it. There is. She has slept under my roof 5 nights. The gasp went up and down that street like fire in dry grass. In my bed, Caleb said louder. Put her with the bolt thrown and me in the barn, and Ezra Cobb'll swear to it on any book you put in front of him. That's a convenient, Bell started. Caleb turned back to Emma, and the whole town saw his face change. I told her something Saturday night, he said. Standing in my own kitchen. I told her that in this valley, a woman who sleeps under a man's roof gets called things she can't never wash off, and I told her if she slept in my bed she'd wake up as my wife. He held out his hand. Emma rose. I meant it Saturday, and I mean it standing here. Emma's eyes were streaming, and she didn't care who watched. She walked out of that crowd and put her hand in his, and Caleb Stone pulled her in and kissed her hard in the middle of the street, in front of the Mercantile and the hotel and the church steps, and Harlan Vance, and every single soul who had turned their face away from her 6 days before. One hand at her jaw and the other flat against her back, and he did not hurry it, and he did not care. Somebody's hat came off. Old Ezra Cobb hollered like a boy. When Caleb let her go, he kept hold of her hand and turned back to the street, and his voice came out of him low and carrying and rough as gravel. Now every one of you look at her good, he said, because from this hour she is my wife, and the next man in this county who says her name careless is going to say it to me. Reverend Prine had his hand over his mouth. Reverend, Caleb said, open your church. Prine opened his church. And as Emma went up those steps hand in hand, past Hattie Mercer, with her fingers pressed to her lips, and Pyle staring at his boots, and Thomas Bell standing frozen with his mouth open, she looked just once into the shade beside the Mercantile. Harlan Vance was still standing with his hands folded, and he was smiling. He touched his hat brim to her pleasant as a Sunday morning, and Emma Rose Whitaker walked into that church, knowing all the way down in her bones that the pleasant smiling man in the shade had just watched his whole plan come apart in the dust, and that men like that do not lose quietly. She squeezed Caleb's hand. Mr. Stone. Emma. He's smiling. I know it, Caleb said. Marry me anyway. She did. The preacher's voice shook through the whole ceremony. Reverend Prine had the look of a man standing in the middle of a river. He hadn't meant to wade into, and he read the words fast, like a person who wanted to be done and dry before something else went wrong. Emma heard every syllable and held onto Caleb's hand, and kept her eyes straight ahead, because if she looked at the crowd, she would see their faces, and she was not ready for their faces yet. "Do you, Caleb Amos Stone, take this woman?" "I do," Caleb said. No pause, no performance. "Do you, Emma Rose Whitaker, take this man?" "I do." Prine looked at both of them over his glasses. "Then I pronounce you man and wife." A breath. "You may, you've already well." The crowd did not applaud. A handful of people shifted. Old Ezra Cobb, standing at the back with his hat in both hands, said "Amen," loud enough for the whole room to hear it. And Harlan Vance, who had come inside after all, and taken a seat in the last pew, like he'd been invited, said nothing at all. Emma felt him there the whole time. That pleasant folded hand silence. It was the loudest thing in the church. The ride home was quiet. Not the bad kind of quiet. The kind that comes after something large has been done, and both people involved are still sorting out what it means. The sun was going west behind the mountains. Emma held the 19 letters in her lap. "You knew," she said, "about the letters. Saturday night when you asked to see them. You already had a notion about Vance." "I had a suspicion," Caleb said. "Not a knowing. There's a difference. A suspicion you can act on alone. A knowing you need to prove." Emma turned that over. "And now I've got a letterhead with his name on it, and Thomas Bell on record as a man who can't read or write, and a wife who was brought to this county specifically to put her name on papers she didn't understand." He kept his eyes on the road. "What I don't have yet is what papers." "The land deeds. Has to be. Vance has been buying up every water claim in this valley for 4 years. He gets Section 14 under his control. He owns the creek from the headwaters down, and every outfit that depends on that water either pays him or dries up." His voice stayed flat, but she could hear the edge underneath it. "My grandfather filed that claim. He carried the survey markers in his coat pocket from Billings. Ain't a soul alive who'd sell it." "But a wife might sign it away," Emma said. "A wife who didn't know what she was signing. A wife who had no family here, no lawyer, no one to say stop." "Yes, ma'am." "I was supposed to be terrified," Emma said. "I was supposed to be so grateful to Thomas Bell for saving me from nothing that I'd put my name on anything he handed me." "And when he saw you," Caleb said quiet, "he knew it wouldn't work. So he sent you away." Emma sat with that a full minute. "That's a worse thing than being jilted." "Yes, it is. He wasn't rejecting me. He was deciding I wasn't useful." "Emma, don't." She put her hand up. "I'm not asking you to make it easier. I just want to understand it plain." He let her have it plain. That was one of the first things she noticed about Caleb Stone. He didn't rush to smooth things over. He let things be sharp when they needed to be. "What do we do?" she said finally. "We go home," he said. "We feed the stock. We cook supper. And tomorrow morning, you tell me everything in those letters, every word, and we figure out what Harlan Vance thought he was buying." Ezra had supper waiting. It was a good supper, beans with salt pork and cornbread, and a dried apple pie that was lopsided on one side and perfect on the other. And he'd set the table with a cloth Emma hadn't seen before, and put a jar of wildflowers in the middle of it. "Ezra," Caleb said, "don't you say one word." Ezra pointed with the ladle. "I had that cloth folded up for 11 years, and if I want to put it out on a wedding supper, then I will, and that's the end of it." Emma pressed her fingers to her mouth. "Thank you," she said. "It's beautiful." Ezra set the beans down and grunted. "Sit down and eat before it goes cold." They sat, the three of them. And it was the strangest thing, stranger in some ways than the church, stranger than the street. It felt like something, like a table that had been too big for one man for too long, and had just now come to the right size. Emma ate 2 plates and did not apologize for either of them. After supper, Caleb went out to check the horses. Ezra put his elbows on the table and looked at her. "You scared?" he said. "Some." "Good. Means you're paying attention." "Is he?" Emma nodded toward the door. "Scared, I mean." Ezra picked up his fork and put it down again. Caleb Stone, he said, has been scared every day since Sarah Hollis died. He just wears it so long he don't know it's there anymore. He told me about her. Said you lost somebody too. My father, 4 years ago. Hard thing losing a father. Hard thing losing anybody. Emma folded her hands. How did she die, if you can say? River crossing spring of 75. Horse went down in the flood. Caleb was 24 years old. Ezra's voice was level. He went in after her. Couldn't get there. Came up alone. Emma was quiet. After that, Ezra said, he came up this mountain and he started building. Fence posts and sheds and water channels. You never seen a man work the way he worked that first year. Like if he stopped, something would catch him. The old man looked at the door. He ain't stopped since. Until Saturday. Ezra looked back at her. Yes, he said. Until Saturday. Monday the work started. Emma rose at 5 and had the stove going by 5:15, and when Caleb came in from the morning check, she had coffee on the table and biscuits in the oven and a pen and her father's writing paper laid out beside the cups. You start, she said. Tell me everything you know about Harlan Vance and Section 14. He sat down. He did not reach for the coffee first. He looked at her, really looked the way he'd been careful not to do in the first few days. You sure you want to do this before breakfast? I've been awake since 4, Emma said. I've been doing it in my head. What have you got? Vance brought me out here to sign land papers. The letters talked about the creek and the northwest quarter of Section 14 in almost every single one. He needed a woman's name on the deed, a wife's name, because in this territory, a husband can't deed away property without his wife's consent. Which means, if Bell was going to transfer Stone Creek, he had to have a wife who'd sign off. Caleb nodded slowly. What else? The letters mentioned a surveyor coming in August. My husband expects a man from the territorial office in August, and I shall want you to receive him kindly. That's from letter 16. I thought it was about hospitality. Emma set her hands flat. It's a land survey. He was going to get me to receive the surveyor and sign whatever he put in front of me before I knew enough to know what I was signing. August is 3 weeks out. I know it. He drank his coffee. She could see him thinking. There's a territorial land commissioner in Bozeman, he said. A man named Aldridge. He's been trying to get something on Vance for 2 years, can't get it to stick because every person who tries to testify against him either changes their mind or moves. He set the cup down. But he's never had a document with Vance's name on it. Emma picked up the trimmed letterhead. He's got one now. The look that crossed Caleb's face then was not quite a smile. It was the look of a man who had been carrying weight so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to set some of it down. You'd go to Bozeman, he said. Testify. I'm your wife, Emma said. This is my land too. What neither of them had counted on was Bell. Thomas Bell had been a small man with a small plan, and small men with small plans, when they feel the ground shift, do small and dangerous things. He came up the road Wednesday morning, not with riders this time, but alone, hat in hand, smiling the particular smile of a man who thinks he can still talk his way back to level ground. Emma saw him from the garden and did not go inside to get Caleb. She picked up her gloves instead and walked to the fence. Mr. Bell? Mrs. Stone. He tried the name and something flickered in his face, not quite shame, not quite envy. You look well. I am well. Say what you came to say. He rolled the hat brim through his fingers. I come to apologize, he said. What I did on Saturday was wrong, and I know it. Emma looked at him a long moment. Where's the deed? She said. The hat stopped rolling. I beg your... The deed to the northwest quarter of Section 14. Emma put her arms on the fence rail. You've got it on you, or you came out here to talk me into signing one. Which is it? Now, Mrs. Stone, I don't know what you think. Thomas. She said it the way her mother used to say it to stock that was fixing to bolt. I have read those letters 12 times. I know every word that's in them and a lot of words that aren't. You came here to talk, so talk. But don't waste my morning with an apology, You don't mean about something you don't regret, because I've got a garden and a husband, and 19 pieces of evidence that says your employer is a criminal, and I am not in the mood. His face went through 3 different expressions. Then he said low and sudden, "He'll bury you. He'll try. You don't know him. I know his handwriting. Emma?" He stopped, started again. "Mrs. Stone, I am in this deeper than I meant to be. That's the truth of it. Vance came to me 2 years ago when I was about to lose my quarter section. He said he had a solution. He said he'd hold my note if I'd help him. Find a woman to sign the deed." Belle's jaw tightened. "It wasn't she was supposed to have a good life. That's what he said. I'd be a decent husband. I'd treat her right. But you looked at me and decided it wasn't worth it." I panicked. "You did," Emma said. "And that panic is the best thing that's happened to me in 4 years, because you sent me away in front of 26 people, and now I'm standing on land I'm legally half owner of, and what you handed me back in front of that hotel is the only thing keeping Harlan Vance from doing exactly this to the next woman he ships out here." She let that land. "So thank you, Thomas, for being exactly as cowardly as you are." He stood at that fence with his hat in his hands and his face working. "If I told you something," he said, "something that helped you, would I what? Would you tell Aldridge I cooperated?" Emma looked at him. "Is what you have worth telling?" He reached inside his coat and pulled out a folded paper. He held it over the fence. She took it. She opened it. And she stopped breathing for a full 10 seconds. It was a list of names. 6 names, 6 properties, 6 signatures, and beside each one a date and a dollar amount. And at the bottom, in that same fine educated hand, she now knew, like her own, was a total. $42,000. Transferred from the Red Hollow Land and Water Company to the Bank of Butte, Montana, under which was a date, 3 weeks from today. "He's leaving," Emma said. "He's been leaving for 6 months, Belle said. "He's been bleeding this valley dry, and he's taking the money, and he's going." He leaned on the fence. "There's a judge coming up from Butte on the 28th for the Land Commission hearing. Vance is planning to be in Wyoming by the 27th. Emma folded the paper and put it in her apron pocket. "Mr. Bell." "Ma'am, go home. Don't talk to Vance. Don't talk to Kagan. Don't ride out of this county." She looked up at him. "And when the time comes, say clearly that you cooperated. I'll say the same." He nodded. He looked hollowed out. "Mrs. Stone." He turned his horse. "For what it's worth." "It ain't worth anything yet," Emma said. "Worth is what you do next." She watched him ride down the road. Then she turned and walked to the barn. Caleb was mending harness. He looked up when she came in and read her face the same way he read whether quick, thorough, already planning. "What happened?" She handed him the paper. She watched him read it. The way his hands went still. The way his jaw set. The way he came to the bottom of the page and read it again. "He's leaving on the 27th, she said. "The judge comes on the 28th. "1 day." Caleb set the paper on the workbench. "We're 1 day short. Only if we wait for the hearing." He looked at her. "The Territorial Commissioner's office is in Bozeman," Emma said. "Aldridge, you said he's been trying to get something on Vance for 2 years. Emma. "We ride to Bozeman tomorrow. We take the letters. We take this list. We take Belle's testimony, written and signed. Ezra can witness it tonight, and we put it all in front of Aldridge, and we let the law do what it's supposed to do. Bozeman's 2 days' ride. Then we leave before dawn. It's not safe, Kagan. I know it's not safe." Emma's voice was steady. "I know Kagan is out there somewhere, and I know Vance is watching this road, and I know that man will not walk away from $42,000 without burning something down first." She took a breath. "But Caleb, if we don't go, those 6 families lose their land. Everything your grandfather filed for is gone. And the next woman Vance ships out here won't have a mountain cowboy standing in the rain to offer her a different road." The silence in that barn was long. Caleb put the harness down. "We'll need Ezra to stay. Lock the house." "Yes." "We ride light. 2 horses, no wagon." "Agreed." "And Emma." He looked at her hard. If Kagan comes up on us on that road, you do not stop to talk. You ride. You hear me. Whatever happens to me, you take that packet and you ride straight through." Emma's throat closed up. "Nothing's going to happen to you. I'm not asking for a promise," Caleb said. "I'm asking for your word." She looked at him. This man she had known 7 days. This man who had put her name in the county book because nobody else would stand between her and a street that had already made up its mind. This man who had kissed her hard in front of Harlan Vance and everyone who worked for him and had slept in his barn every night since and never once asked for anything different. "You have my word," she said. Something in his face went loose, just for a moment. "Good," he said, and picked up the harness again. Ezra signed Bell's statement that evening and pressed his thumb into the wax seal with the seriousness of a man signing a treaty. "You riding through the valley," he said. "North Pass," Caleb said. "Less traveled." "Kagan knows the North Pass." "Kagan knows every pass. The north one's got better cover." Ezra looked at Emma. "You ride well, girl." "Well enough." "How's your shot?" Emma reached for the rifle on the wall, checked the load, the way her father had taught her, cylinder hammer action, and set it back. Ezra nodded. "Don't let him get ahead of you on a downhill," he said. "Caleb's a fool on downhills. Thinks the horse is faster than it is." "I'm right here," Caleb said. "I know it." Ezra sat down heavily. "I know it, son. He said the word like it cost him something. And Caleb went still for just a moment, and Emma looked away because some things between old men and the young ones they've watched grow up are not for strangers to see. She went to pack the letters. They rode before the sun. The valley was dark and cool, and Emma could hear the creek below them on the left-hand side, running fast from the July rains, and she thought about Vance wanting to own that sound, that water, the whole living weight of it. She thought about how a man could look at a river and see a dollar amount and nothing else. She kept the packet inside her coat against her chest. An hour up the North Pass, Caleb pulled even with her. "How are you holding?" "Good." "You?" "Good." They rode a few minutes more. "Emma." "I need to say something." "Say it." "What I said Sunday, in front of the church." He paused. "I meant it to protect you. I need you to know the protecting was real. I know that. But the rest of it—" He stopped, started again slower. "The rest of it came out with more feeling than I planned, and I don't want you to think I'm going to—" "Caleb." "Ma'am? Are you trying to apologize for kissing your wife?" He was quiet. "Because I would prefer you didn't," Emma said. Another quiet. Longer. "Noted," he said. She looked straight ahead at the dark pass, and she let herself smile just once, just for herself, in the blue-black morning air. They were 4 hours up when she heard it. Hooves. Behind them. Moving fast. Not the sound of one horse. The sound of 3. "Caleb." "I hear it." He looked back over his shoulder. "Don't stop. Don't turn around." "It's Kagan." "It might not be." "Caleb." "Ride," he said. Flat. Certain. "Emma, ride." She put her heels in, and the mare came up, and they went up that pass at a dead run, with the gray light just beginning over the mountains, and the sound of hooves behind her like a heartbeat she couldn't outrun. She heard a shot. She did not stop. She heard Caleb shout something behind her. Her name, she thought. But the wind took it, and she did not stop because she had given her word, and she kept her word, and the packet was against her chest, and Bozeman was ahead, and she rode. She made the ridge. She pulled up hard at the top and looked back. Below on the switchback, Caleb's horse had the trail blocked sideways. 3 riders had pulled up short in front of him. Kagan in the middle. She could hear their voices faint, carried up on the air. She could not hear the words, but she could see Caleb's posture straight in the saddle rifle across his thighs, one hand loose, and she understood that he was buying her time. That this was the whole play. That he had known getting on that horse before sunrise that it might come to this, and he had gotten on the horse anyway. The packet pressed against her ribs. She turned the mare east. She rode. Bozeman came up at mid-afternoon sprawling and loud and smelling of horses and sawdust, and Emma rode straight down the main street with her coat dusty and her hair wild and the packet in her hand, and she stopped at the first man who looked like he worked for the government. "I'm looking for Commissioner Aldridge." The man pointed. She went. Abel Aldridge was a compact gray-haired man with ink on his fingers and a desk that looked like a battlefield. And when Emma Whitaker walked through his door and set a packet of 19 letters, one trimmed letterhead, and a signed statement on top of his battlefield, he looked up at her over his spectacles, the way a man looks up when he thinks something important just walked in. "My name is Emma Stone," she said. "My husband is Caleb Stone of Stone Creek Ranch in the Red Hollow Valley. I have evidence that Harlan Vance of the Red Hollow Land and Water Company has been defrauding landowners in this territory for 4 years, and I have evidence that he plans to transfer the proceeds $42,000 to the Bank of Butte and leave the territory by the 27th of this month." Aldridge looked at the packet. He looked at her face. He took his spectacles off and put them back on. "Sit down, Mrs. Stone," he said. "I'd rather stand until I know you're going to act on this." He pulled the packet toward him and opened it. For 5 minutes, the only sound in that office was paper and the street noise from outside, and Emma stood in front of his desk, with her heart at full gallop, and thought about Caleb on that switchback, and did not let herself think too hard. Aldridge looked up. "Mrs. Stone, this letterhead is genuine, and your husband is on the North Pass right now because 3 of Vance's riders came up behind us this morning and he stopped to let me through." Her voice came out even. She was proud of it. "Which is why I need you to act today." Aldridge stared at her. Then he stood up and went to the door. "Harrison," he shouted. "Get the sheriff. Get him now." He came back to the desk. "It'll take 3 hours to get a marshal's party organized and up that pass," he said. "Is your husband the kind of man who can hold a position for 3 hours?" Emma thought about 11 years on a mountain, about fence posts and water channels, about a man who had been carrying grief so long he wore it like a coat and still got up every morning and did the work. "Yes," she said. "He's exactly that kind of man." Aldridge reached for his pen. "Then talk," he said. "Start from the first letter and don't leave anything out." Emma pulled up the chair. She sat down, and she started talking. She was on the 14th letter when the door opened. She knew before she turned around. She knew by the sound of the step, that particular unhurried, flat-heeled tread she'd heard first on a wet porch 6 nights ago. Caleb Stone walked into Abel Aldridge's office with a cut above his left ear that had bled down his jaw and dried there, and his rifle in his hand, and 4 days of mountain and road on him, and he stopped in the middle of the room. He looked at Emma. Emma looked at him. "You made it," she said. "We had a conversation," he said. "Kagan decided he'd rather wait and see how things go." "You're bleeding." "Some." "Sit down." "In a minute." He looked at Aldridge. "You the commissioner?" "I am." "She give you everything?" "She's giving it to me now." Caleb nodded. He came and sat down in the chair beside Emma without being asked. He set the rifle across his knees. He looked at the stack of letters on the desk. "My grandfather filed that creek claim in 1861, he said. "He didn't have a pot nor a window, but he stood in a land office in Billings, and he filed it legal and fair. That creek's run through Stoneland my whole life." "Yes, sir," Aldridge said. "Then let's finish this." Emma picked up letter 14. She read it aloud. Outside the window. Bozeman went on being loud and dusty and indifferent, the way towns are when something important is happening in an office on a side street that most people will only read about later. And in that office, a woman who had come 1,100 miles on a lie and a mountain cowboy who hadn't left his ridge in 11 years sat side by side in front of a government man's desk and laid out the shape of everything Harlan Vance had built and everything he thought he was going to take. Caleb reached over at some point between letter 17 and 18 and put his hand over hers on the desk. He didn't say anything. Neither did she. She turned to letter 18. Aldridge worked through the night. Emma knew because she and Caleb sat in the hallway outside his office until past midnight, and every time the door opened, there was another man going in or coming out. The sheriff, a deputy, a clerk with ink-stained hands. Once a man in a traveling coat who came in fast and left faster and didn't look at either of them. Caleb had his cut cleaned and wrapped by a barber who worked out of the room next door and charged 2 bits and didn't ask questions, which Caleb paid without a word. They didn't talk much. They were past the point where talking filled the silence well. At some point, Emma fell asleep in the chair with her head against the wall, and when she woke up, Caleb had put his coat over her shoulders without waking her, and he was sitting beside her with his eyes open and his hands loose on his knees, the way a man sits when he's been watching a long time. "How long was I asleep?" she said. "Couple hours." "You should have woken me. You needed it more than I did." She handed the coat back. He put it on without comment. At 2 in the morning, Aldridge opened the door and looked at them both. "I've got a territorial warrant," he said, "for Harlan Vance and Dutch Kagan both. Judge Whitmore is signing it right now." Emma stood up. "What about Bell?" "Bell cooperates. Bell gets consideration. That's the deal." Aldridge looked at Caleb. "We're sending 4 marshals up to Red Hollow at first light. They'll want a man who knows the valley." "I know every inch of it," Caleb said. "Then get some sleep, both of you. I've got a room at the hotel on the county." He looked at Emma. "Mrs. Stone, that 14th letter, the survey reference. That alone is enough to open a fraud inquiry on 6 separate land transactions. You may have saved more than your own land tonight." Emma thought about the 6 names on Bell's list. 6 families. 6 sets of names in that same fine handwriting, people shipped and maneuvered and signed over the same way she'd nearly been. "They'll get their land back," she said. "That's for the court to sort out, but they'll have a fighting chance they didn't have yesterday." He put his hand on the doorframe. "That's more than most people walk in here with." He went back inside. Emma sat back down. 6 families, she said. "And more we don't know yet," Caleb said. "Vance has been at this a long time." "Then tonight matters." "Tonight matters," he agreed. She looked at her hands in her lap. 1,100 miles of hard use, and not one thing she'd planned for. "My father used to say," she said quietly, "that the thing you build out of what breaks you is always stronger than the thing that broke." Caleb was quiet a moment. "Your father sounds like he was a good man. How was the best man I ever knew?" She paused. "Until recent." The hallway was very still. Caleb looked at her sideways. He didn't say anything, but she felt the shift in him, the way the air between 2 people can change without a single word, and she kept her eyes on her hands and let it sit there warm and complicated and real. They rode back before dawn with 4 U.S. Marshals and Aldridge himself, who turned out to be the kind of government man who went where his warrants went, which Emma immediately respected. The North Pass was cold in the pre-dawn, and nobody talked much. Caleb rode point, and the marshals rode behind him, and Emma rode beside Aldridge, who kept looking at her the way people look at something that surprised them. "You said you came out here as a mail-order bride," he said after an hour. "I did. And you've been in this valley 9 days. 10 as of this morning." He shook his head slowly. "Not in a bad way. In the way of a man recalculating. I've had men working the Vance case for 2 years, he said. Lawyers, surveyors, men who knew what they were looking for. I know. You walked in off a stagecoach. I didn't walk in looking, Emma said. Sometimes that's better. When you're not looking for a particular thing, you see what's actually there. What made you look at the letters again? Caleb asked about them before he asked about anything else. A man doesn't ask about letters first, unless letters are the thing that matters. She looked ahead at the broad back of her husband on his horse moving easy in the gray light. He knew something was wrong before I did. I just had the evidence. Aldridge rode quiet for a while. Mrs. Stone, he said. When this is settled, and I believe it will settle quickly once we have Vance in front of a judge, there'll be a formal hearing. The 6 families on that list. Testimony will be needed. You'll have mine. It won't be comfortable. Bell will testify about his role, which will mean he talks about what he thought he was doing with you. Let him talk, Emma said. I'm not afraid of Thomas Bell's version of me. I know my own version better. Aldridge nodded. I thought you might say something like that. They came down off the pass and into the valley at mid-morning, and the first thing Emma saw was smoke. Not campfire smoke, not cook-stove smoke, the thick rolling black kind. She put her heels in before she had time to think about it, and the mare surged forward, and she heard Caleb shout her name from somewhere behind her, but she was already running. The smoke was coming from the direction of the Harmon place, the family whose name she'd seen second on Belle's list. 2 children, 160 acres, signed over 18 months ago. She'd looked at their name twice, because the handwriting on their entry was different from the others, shakier, like someone who'd been scared when they signed. She pulled up at their fence line and looked. The barn was burning, and in the yard 3 horses stood with Kagan's brand. She counted. 3 horses, Kagan and 2 men. No sign of the family. She reined back behind the fence line just as Caleb came up hard beside her. "Emma. Kagan's in there. 3 horses. It's the Harmon place, they're on Belle's list." Caleb looked at the smoke. His face did the thing it did when he was adding numbers fast. "Where's the family?" "I don't know." The marshals came up behind them. Aldridge pulled alongside. "Kagan T," Caleb said without turning around. 3 horses. He's burning the barn." "He knows we went to Bozeman," Emma said. "He knows what we did. He's destroying evidence." "Or warning the valley," Caleb said. "What happens if every family on that list wakes up this morning to smoke on their fence line?" "They don't testify," Aldridge said. "They don't testify," Caleb confirmed. "They're too scared and too busy surviving to stand up in a court." One of the marshals said, "Sir." Aldridge looked at the barn. "We go in," he said. The arrest of Dutch Kagan happened fast and loud, and not quite the way anyone planned. Kagan came out of his barn door at a dead run with a burning brand in his hand and nearly collided with a U.S. Marshal's horse, which caused the horse to shy sideways and the marshal to say something that Aldridge later pretended he hadn't heard. Kagan threw the brand missed and went for his gun, and Caleb Stone was already off his horse and across the yard, and had Kagan's gun arm up behind his back before the brand hit the ground. "Dutch," Caleb said. "Don't." Kagan was breathing hard. He twisted once, felt the angle of his arm, and stopped. "Stone." "Where's the family?" "I don't know what you're... Dutch." Caleb's voice dropped to something very flat. "I've known you 6 years. I've bought horses off you. I've had no quarrel with you except the one Vance paid you to have. Now I am asking you plain, and I am asking you once, where are the Harmons?" A pause. "Root cellar," Kagan said. "I told them to get in the root cellar." "Why?" "Because Vance told me to burn the barn, and I didn't want the kids to see it." His voice came out rough and low. "I ain't that kind of man." Emma, who had come into the yard behind the marshals, looked at Dutch Kagan, big, hard-faced Vance's man from the beginning, and saw something in him she hadn't expected. Something tired. "Let them out," she said. Kagan looked at her over his shoulder. "Ma'am, let them out of the cellar." She walked to him, stopped in front of him. "And then you're going to tell Commissioner Aldridge everything Vance told you to do. All of it. Not just this morning." Vance is going to be in federal custody by sundown," Emma said. "Which means the only question is whether you go down with him, or you come up out of this with your name still worth something." She paused. "You didn't want the children to see the fire. That's still in you, Dutch. Don't let Harlan Vance be the last decision you make." The yard was completely quiet, except for the fire eating what was left of the Harmon barn. Kagan looked at Aldridge, at the marshals, at Caleb, who still had his arm. Then he called out, "Mrs. Harmon, it's over. You can come out." The root cellar door lifted. A woman with red hair and 2 small boys at her knees came up blinking into the morning light, and when she saw the marshals, she pressed her hand flat over her mouth, and her knees went, and she had to grab the doorframe. Emma went to her. "You're safe," she said. "It's over." The woman. Martha Harmon, 29 years old. 160 acres of her parents' land, grabbed Emma's arm like a drowning woman. "They took our deed," she said. 2 years ago. I signed something and I didn't understand." "I know," Emma said. "I know. That's why we're here." They found Vance in Red Hollow. Of course they did. A man who had spent 4 years being the most powerful figure in a valley does not run at the first sign of trouble. He waits. He watches. He calculates. And if he can't calculate his way out, he improvises. Harlan Vance was improvising. He was standing in the middle of Bell's mercantile, which turned out to be his mercantile, which had been Bell's only, in the way that a dog is its own, until the owner calls it with 3 of his own men, and a stack of papers on the counter that he was feeding into the stove one at a time, when Aldridge's party rode into Red Hollow. Somebody ran ahead and told him. He fed the papers faster. Caleb went through the front door first. Vance, Harlan Vance, was silver-haired and pleasant, and he turned from the stove with the same folded hands expression Emma had seen from the church pew, like a man who had been interrupted at something perfectly ordinary. Mr. Stone. He looked past Caleb at the marshals filing in behind. Commissioner Aldridge, what a surprise. Leave the stove, Aldridge said. I can see what you're doing. Aldridge crossed the room and put himself between Vance and the stove. Leave it. Vance left it. He put his hands together and looked around the room and did the calculation with his eyes. Marshals Caleb. Emma in the doorway, and Emma watched him do it, and watched him arrive at the number, and watched his face not change at all, and that stillness, that perfect pleasantness, was the most frightening thing she'd seen in 11 days. Mrs. Stone, he said, looking at her. You've been busy. I have, she said. 1,100 miles for an adventure. I came out here for a home, Emma said. I found one. Along the way I found your letters, your letterhead, your list of names, and your departure date. She walked into the room. Turns out 1,100 miles buys a lot. Something moved behind Vance's eyes. Whatever Thomas Bell told you. Thomas Bell signed a statement, Aldridge said. Last night, 2 witnesses. Bell can't. Vance stopped. Can't what? Emma said. Testify he can. He did. In writing witnessed and in the commissioner's safe in Bozeman as of midnight. She looked at him steadily. And before you finish that thought, Dutch Kagan is outside with 2 marshals, and he is also talking. Quite a lot, actually. For the first time, the pleasantness slipped. Just for a second. Like a mask that fitted wrong. Then it came back. You're a clever woman, Vance said. I'm a woman who read her own mail, Emma said. You made the letters too good, Mr. Vance. Too many details. You were proud of the plan, and it showed on the page. The court will want more than letters. The court has the letterhead, the bank transfer list, 6 families who signed papers they didn't understand, 2 cooperating witnesses. Aldridge opened his coat and took out the warrant. And this. He held it out. Vance looked at it without taking it. Commissioner, he said quietly, I am a reasonable man. I have resources. I have... Mr. Vance. Aldridge's voice came out flat and final. I have been trying to get you in front of a judge for 2 years. I am not a reasonable man this morning. I am a man with a warrant and 4 marshals. He nodded to the nearest one. Take him. Vance's 3 men looked at each other. None of them moved. Caleb Stone stepped to the left, casually putting himself between the 3 men and the door. And it was not a dramatic gesture. It was the move of a man who had done math and decided where he needed to be, and the 3 men looked at him and did their own math and stayed where they were. The marshal took Vance by the arm, and Harlan Vance for the last time in Red Hollow smiled his pleasant smile. This isn't finished, he said. I have lawyers in 3 territories. Then they'll have work, Aldridge said. Move. They moved him toward the door. Emma stepped aside to let them pass. Vance came level with her and stopped or tried to. The marshal didn't quite let him stop. You should have gone back on Thursday's coach, Vance said. You should have written worse letters, Emma said. He was taken out. The street of Red Hollow was full. Everyone was there. The hotel clerk Pyle with his hat in his hands. Hattie Mercer on her boarding house step with her arms unfolded for the first time. Reverend Prine at the church door. The men from the mercantile. Women with children at their hips. Ranch hands who'd ridden in for supplies and stayed when they heard the noise. They watched Harlan Vance come out of the mercantile in the grip of a U.S. Marshal. They watched Dutch Kagan, already loaded on a horse, not meeting anyone's eyes. And they watched Emma Stone come out after them and stand on the step in the same dress she'd worn on Saturday when Thomas Bell had handed her her suitcase in this same street in front of these same people. Nobody said a word. Then Martha Harmon came around the corner of the building with her 2 boys and her red hair still wild from the cellar, and she pointed at Emma and said to the nearest person, loud enough for half the street to hear, "That woman right there, she's the reason I still have my land." And the street changed. It changed the way a room changes when someone opens a window, not all at once, but moving the air, shifting the light, getting different. Pyle took a step forward. Hattie Mercer came off her step. Reverend Prine stopped wringing his hands. Thomas Bell was at the edge of the crowd. He'd come in from somewhere, his own half-borrowed mercantile maybe, or the hotel he'd signed over, or just down the road from whatever was left of the life Vance had built him. He looked at Emma the way a man looks when he's trying to decide what face to wear. Emma looked back. He took off his hat. It wasn't much, but it was something. She turned away. Caleb found her at the wagon. She was sitting on the wheel hub with her hands folded and her eyes somewhere in the middle distance, doing the things she did when she was adding things up inside herself, and he came and stood beside her and didn't say anything for a while. "You all right?" he said finally. "I'm trying to decide what I am," Emma said. "I thought when it was over I'd feel finished. I mostly just feel tired." "That's what finished feels like," Caleb said. "First time around. You sound like you know." "Lost a court case over water rights in '79. When the judge ruled for us, I went out back and sat down in the mud behind the courthouse and couldn't get up for 20 minutes. He leaned on the wagon. Felt like everything I'd held on to for 2 years let go all at once. Emma laughed. She hadn't expected to laugh, and it came out slightly wrong, and she put her hand over her mouth. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be. It's a good sound." He looked at her sideways. "Been a while since this wagon heard it." She dropped her hand. "Caleb." "Emma. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "Have I been anything else?" "No," she admitted. "That's why I'm asking." She looked at her hands. "Now that Aldridge has what he needs, now that it's done, what happens to us?" The wagon creaked in the heat. "What do you want to happen?" he said. "I asked you first." I was quiet long enough that she looked up. He was looking at her the way he'd looked at her in the church doorway Sunday morning. Not polite, not careful, just looking. "I told you in my kitchen," he said. "Barn every night as long as you wanted." "That was a month ago, that was 10 days ago." 10 days, yes ma'am. "And things have changed." "Some things," he said. "Not the offer." Emma looked at him. "What if I don't want you in the barn?" The words came out steadier than she felt. She watched his face. He went very still. "Say that again," he said. "I've been on this earth 27 years, Emma said. I have had exactly one home, and I lost it when my father died. I have had exactly one plan for building another one, and it was handed back to me with the luggage." She kept her eyes level. "And then I came up a mountain in the rain, and in 10 days I built something with my own hands and your name and Ezra's dried apple pie, and I am not—" Her voice almost went. She held it. "I am not interested in being business arrangements, Caleb. I've had enough of those to last me." He said nothing. "So I am asking you," she said straight and plain, the way you asked me Sunday, "do you want a wife, or do you want a legal arrangement that sleeps in your house?" The street went on, making its noise around them. Somewhere a child hollered. A horse stamped. Caleb Stone reached out and took her face in both hands, the way a man handles something he is afraid to break and more afraid to lose, and he looked at her from 6 inches away for a long moment that had no performance in it at all. "I built 11 years of fences," he said. "Every post a reason not to come down off that mountain, every wire a reason to stay put." His thumbs moved against her jaw. "You rode through every single one of them in 10 days, Emma Rose, and I am not sending you to the barn." She put her hand against his chest. She could feel his heart going. Not slow. Not the heart of a careful man. "Then stop sleeping in it," she said. He kissed her. Not like Sunday, not the hard public "this is what I mean" kiss in front of the whole town. This one was quiet. This one was just for them at a wagon wheel on the edge of Red Hollow on a Thursday in July, with the case won and the valley just beginning to sort itself out, and Ezra Cobb, 9 miles up a mountain, probably already making that lopsided pie. When he pulled back, he kept his hands where they were. Emma. We've been married 10 days, and I don't know your middle name. She looked at him. Rose, she said. Emma Rose. I know the Rose. I mean that is my middle name. He stared at her. Your name is Emma Rose Whitaker. Emma Rose Whitaker Stone, she said. And if you tell Ezra, he'll put it on a pie and I will never hear the end of it. Caleb laughed. She had not heard him laugh before. It was the kind that starts in the chest and comes up like a well surprised, like it hadn't been used enough to come easy. She decided she wanted to hear it every day for the rest of her life. They were getting ready to ride out when Aldridge found them. He was carrying a leather folio, and he had the look of a man who had one more thing and knew it was going to land a certain way. Mrs. Stone, Commissioner. I need to tell you something before you go, and I need you to hear it without reacting until I finish. Emma went still. We went through the papers Vance was burning, Aldridge said. Most of them are gone. But there's one he didn't get to. It was under the counter. He opened the folio. He turned it toward her. Emma looked at the document. It was a deed. To the northwest quarter of Section 14 Stone Creek Ranch, Stone River Valley, Montana Territory. Her name was on it. Not Caleb's, not Belle's. Emma Rose Whitaker. Undated. Unsigned. Notarized by a man whose seal she didn't recognize, with a blank space at the bottom where her signature was supposed to go. This is what he built it for, Aldridge said. Everything. The letters, Belle, the public rejection, all of it, to bring a woman out here who had no standing, no family, no options, and get this signed. Emma stared at her own name on a page she'd never seen before. Her name. Printed there months ago by a man who had never met her on a deed to land that belonged to Caleb's grandfather. If she'd signed this, Caleb said behind her. His voice was very controlled. She would have transferred ownership of Stone Creek's water rights to a shell company Vance set up in Wyoming, Aldridge said, which would then have sold them to a railroad land syndicate out of Chicago. He paused. The syndicate has a name if you want it. I want it, Caleb said. Midland Pacific Consolidated. They've been buying water rights along this whole range for 3 years. Vance was their man. He got them the land, they gave him a percentage and a way out. Aldridge closed the folio. This wasn't just about your valley, Mr. Stone. This was about the whole watershed. The whole watershed. Emma thought about what that meant. Every ranch that depended on snowmelt coming down off these mountains. Every family watering stock in summer. Every homesteader who'd filed a claim in good faith on good land. All of it. For a percentage. How many valleys? She asked. We're still counting, Aldridge said. But Mrs. Stone, your letters are the thread. We pull that thread and the whole Midland Pacific operation in this territory comes apart. He looked at her steadily. Which means this is bigger than I told you in Bozeman. Bigger than 6 families. Federal prosecutors are going to want your testimony, possibly in front of a congressional inquiry. Emma heard the size of it come down around her. She thought about the stagecoach. About 41 days on a train and a coach with a broken spring. About a man handing her luggage back in front of 26 people on a hot Saturday afternoon. She thought about what had been done to her, what had been almost done, and she felt the full weight of it, not as a wound this time, but as something else entirely. Evidence. Every bit of it. She straightened her spine. Tell the federal prosecutors, she said, that I'll be at whatever hearing they call. Give them my name. Tell them I kept every letter. I've already told them, Aldridge said. She looked at him. You telegraphed already. Last night, when I read the 14th letter. He tucked the folio under his arm. Mrs. Stone, I've been doing this work for 20 years. Most of the time, the people with the best evidence are too frightened to use it, or too beaten down, or they traded it for something safe. He tipped his hat. You are the first woman who has ever walked into my office and laid it on my desk before I knew to ask. Emma looked at the folio with her name on a deed she'd never signed. "I didn't know what I was walking into," she said. "I just knew I had the letters, and somebody had to look at them." "That's how most of the important things get done," Aldridge said. "Not by the people who knew what they were doing, by the people who just showed up." He shook Caleb's hand and walked back into the crowd. Emma stood at the wagon with Caleb beside her, and Red Hollow moved around them, and somewhere in the middle of it, Martha Harmon was talking to two other women. Emma didn't recognize, and their faces had a quality she knew, the particular look of people who have just been told they were not crazy. That the thing that happened to them was real, that there is a name for it and a legal process for it, and a woman from Nebraska who can stand up in front of a federal hearing and say so. "Emma," Caleb said, "I know. You didn't say anything about a congressional inquiry when you asked me to marry you." "I didn't know about it then." "You know now." "I do." He was quiet a beat. "Good thing you married a man with a lot of fence posts," he said. "We'll need somewhere to put the lawyers." She turned to look at him. He was not quite smiling, but his eyes were. She took his hand. "Take me home, Mr. Stone," she said. He helped her up onto the wagon. He climbed up beside her. He picked up the reins. And as they turned the wagon north toward the mountain, toward Ezra and the stove and the roof that only leaked in one corner, a sound ran through the crowd behind them that Emma didn't understand at first. A collected low sound like a breath let out, and she looked back over her shoulder and saw it. They were watching the wagon go, and Hattie Mercer had both hands pressed to her chest, and Pyle had his hat off, and Reverend Prine was standing in front of his church with his arms at his sides and his chin up, the posture of a man who had done something too little and too late, and knew it and was going to carry it. And at the far edge of the crowd, Thomas Bell watched the wagon with his hat in his hands. Emma looked at all of them. She did not wave. She did not perform forgiveness. She hadn't finished finding yet. She just looked long enough to let them know she saw them, and then she turned back around and put her face into the mountain air, coming down off the North Pass, clean and cool, and carrying the smell of the creek she now half owned. Caleb. Emma. What does it look like, the Northwest Quarter in July? He thought about it. Green, he said. Real green. Grass comes up past your knees on a good year. Creek runs fast and cold even in August. A pause. There's a cottonwood down by the water that my grandfather planted when he filed the claim. Thing's 40 feet tall. Emma closed her eyes for a moment. 40 feet tall. 30 years of water and sun and staying put. "I want to see it," she said. "You will," Caleb said. He put the horse to a trot, and they rode north into everything that came next. Ezra knew before they said a word. He was sitting on the porch step when the wagon came up the road, and he looked at their faces, and he looked at how close together they were sitting on that bench, and he stood up with his hands on his knees and said, "Well, I'll put more beans on." "Ezra," Caleb started. "Don't tell me anything until I've got coffee in my hand," Ezra said. "I'm an old man, and I require preparation." He went inside. Emma looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at Emma. "He always liked this," she said. "Every day for 11 years. "Good," she said, and climbed down off the wagon. Inside while Ezra banged around the stove with the particular violence of a man making himself useful. Emma sat at the table and told him everything. Kagan. The Harmon barn. Vance in the mercantile feeding papers into the fire. The deed with her name on it. Aldridge and the federal inquiry. All of it in order the way her father had taught her to tell a thing. Start at the start. Don't skip the hard parts. End where it ends. Ezra listened without interrupting, which told her it was serious, because Ezra interrupted everything. When she finished, he poured 3 cups of coffee and sat down. "Congressional inquiry," he said. "That's what Aldridge said. You'll have to go to Helena, maybe further. I know it. You'll have to stand up in front of men in suits and tell the story of how you came out here to be somebody's wife and got used as a land instrument instead." "Yes." Ezra wrapped both hands around his cup. "Good," he said. Emma blinked. "Good. Woman who can do what you did in 10 days in a valley she'd never seen before can stand up in front of any room in this territory." He looked at her over the cup. I'm not worried about you, girl. I'm worried about the men in suits. Caleb made a sound that might have been agreement, or might have been something he was trying to hide. Emma looked at her coffee. I'm a little worried about me, she said honestly. That's how you know you'll do it right, Ezra said. The people who aren't worried are the ones who don't understand what they're walking into. The first week after Red Hollow was quiet, the way that comes after a storm, not peaceful exactly, but cleared. The land was still there, the fences still needed checking, the horses still needed feeding, and the creek ran on exactly as it always had, indifferent to the fact that someone had tried to sell it. Emma learned the ranch. She learned it the way she'd learned everything, by doing it before she asked about it, and only asking when she'd already figured out what the question was. She knew horses, and she knew cattle, and she knew water, so those came quick. The high pens were new to her, and the particular way Stone Creek ran in summer, dropping off fast after the July rains. She mapped it in her head the way her father had taught her to map things, walking it first, and then drawing it out at the table at night until she had it whole. Caleb watched her learn. He didn't help unless she asked, which she appreciated, and she didn't ask often, which he seemed to appreciate in return. They had found, without discussing it, a working language, the kind that develops between people who are good at different things and smart enough to know it. What was harder was the evenings. Not hard badly, just uncharted. They'd eaten supper together the first night back, and Ezra had gone to bed early with his usual claim of tiredness, which Emma was beginning to suspect was less about tiredness and more about leaving them alone on purpose. And she and Caleb had sat at the table after with the lamp between them, and the silence had been different from the silences on the road. Fuller somehow, like a room that has furniture in it now. Tell me about Sarah, Emma said. Caleb looked up from his cup. You don't have to, she said. But I'd like to know, if you're willing. He turned the cup in his hands. She was from Missouri, he said. Came out here with her family in '73. Her father was a doctor, the Valley's first. She had brown hair, and she talked fast, and she could not ride to save her life. But she tried every single time, like it was the first time she'd ever tried. Emma smiled. She sounds stubborn. Obstinate, Caleb said. That's the word her mother used. I thought it was the finest thing I'd ever seen. He was quiet a moment. We were going to be married that June. The river went up in May. She was crossing to help her father with a patient on the other side, and the horse lost its footing. And you went in. I went in. He set the cup down. I got to her. I had her. And then the current. He stopped. I had her, and then I didn't. Emma said nothing. Some things don't need words put around them. After, Caleb said, people in this valley said things about me, that I should have gotten there sooner, that I should have found a different crossing, that a real man would have. He stopped again. You know how people talk when they need somewhere to put grief that doesn't belong to them? I know exactly how people talk, Emma said. So I came up here. He looked at the window. And I built fence posts. For 11 years. For 11 years. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. He looked at it. He turned his hand over and held hers properly, the way you hold something you mean to keep. I'm not Sarah, Emma said. No. I'm not trying to be. I know it. I don't want you to be. He looked at her, then direct the way he always was when it counted. Emma, what happened with Sarah broke something in me, and I've been living with the break for a long time. I'm not going to stand here and tell you it's all fixed because you came up a mountain in the rain. I wouldn't believe you if you did. But it's... He paused, searching. It's different now. The break is still there. But it doesn't run the whole length of me anymore. Emma's throat tightened. That's enough, she said. That's more than enough. He didn't let go of her hand. They stayed at that table until the lamp burned low, and they talked about her father, about Nebraska, about what 400 acres looks like in February when the wind comes off the Platte and the cattle have to be brought in tight. About what Montana looks like in October, the aspens going yellow on the high slopes, the creek slowing. About small things and large things, and the particular way grief and hope can live in the same body at the same time. Ezra found them there in the morning, asleep in their chairs, with Emma's head on Caleb's shoulder, and he put 2 fresh cups of coffee on the table without a word and went back to bed for another hour. The letter from Helena came 2 weeks later. Marshal's office. Federal prosecutor's seal. Emma Rose Stone requested to present testimony in the matter of the United States versus Harlan Vance Midland, Pacific Consolidated and Associated Parties, before the Territorial Land Commission. Helena, Montana Territory, September the 4th. Emma read it at the table with her coffee, and then read it again. Caleb. He came from the barn. She handed it to him. He read it, standing up, and she watched him read it, the same way she'd watched him read Bell's List, hands going still, jaw-setting, working through to the end. September the 4th, he said. 6 weeks. It's a long way to Helena. I know. There'll be lawyers. Vance will have the best ones he can hire, and he can hire good ones. I know that too. He set the letter down. You scared? Terrified, Emma said. You going to try to talk me out of it? No, ma'am. He sat down. I'm going to ride to Helena with you and sit in that courthouse every single day until it's done. She looked at him. You'll lose 6 weeks of work. I'll lose 6 weeks of work. The fall cutting. Ezra can manage the fall cutting. He managed it before you came. Caleb's voice was level. Emma, you are my wife. Whatever room you walk into, I'm in the room. A pause. That's not me protecting you. You don't need protection. That's me saying I'm not standing behind a crowd again in my life. She pressed her lips together hard. You have to stop saying things like that, she said. Like what? Things that make me... She stopped. Just stop. I reckon I won't, he said, and picked up his coffee. But first, Red Hollow had its own reckoning. It came the way it needed to, not in the courthouse, not in front of a judge, but on a Wednesday morning at the general store that had been Vance's mercantile and was now just the mercantile again, with no paper on it belonging to anyone except the family that had run it for 20 years before Vance arrived. Emma was there for salt and flour when Martha Harmon came in behind her with her 2 boys. The store was half full. People. Emma recognized the hotel clerk Pyle, 2 women from the church circle, a rancher named Greer, who'd been in the crowd on Saturday. Martha's older boy knocked a tin off a shelf, and it crashed loud, and every head turned, and Martha flinched, the quick, deep flinch of a woman who had been flinching for 2 years every time a loud thing happened, and Emma saw it and put her hand on Martha's arm. It's all right, Emma said. I know it, Martha said. I know it is. I know, Emma said. Pyle came from behind his counter. Mrs. Harmon, he said. Mrs. Stone. He stopped in front of them with his hands together. I want to... He started again. What I did, both of you, the night Mrs. Stone came in. I want to say... Mr. Pyle, Emma said. He stopped. I know why you did it, she said. I know Vance held your paper, and I know you have children, and I know that a man in that position does what he can to hold his footing. She looked at him straight. What matters to me is what you do now, not what you did then. Pyle's face worked. I'd like to testify, he said. In Helena, if they'll have me. I've got records, bills of sale, dates when Vance's men came in and what they said. He swallowed. I kept them. Even when I shouldn't have. I kept them because I knew... He looked down. I knew what was happening wasn't right. I just didn't know what to do about it. Then now you know, Emma said. He nodded. He went back to his counter, and Hattie Mercer, who had been standing near the window pretending to look at fabric, turned around and said, I have records too. The store went quiet. Hattie walked over. She had the bearing of a woman who had made up her mind before she left the house. Vance's man came to me 18 months ago, she said. Told me he could have my boarding house put under a health ordinance if I didn't cooperate. I cooperated. I have everything he told me to do written down, because my mother told me to write down everything a man tells you to do in writing, so there's no argument about it later. She looked at Emma. My mother was a smart woman. She sounds like it, Emma said. I should have let you in that night. Yes, Emma said. You should have. Hattie took that without blinking. I know it. But you let me in now, Emma said. And you've got records and a mother's good advice. So. She held out her hand. Emma Stone. Hattie looked at the hand. She shook it. Harriet Mercer, she said. In the corner, Greer the rancher put down his goods and cleared his throat. I signed something, he said loud enough for the whole store. 2 years ago, Vance's man said it was a water-sharing agreement. I think it weren't. 3 other people shifted, then started talking. Emma stood in the middle of the Red Hollow General Store and listened to a valley find its voice, and she thought about the cottonwood tree down by the creek that Caleb's grandfather had planted 30 years ago, and how a thing can be in the ground that long and still be alive, still be growing, still be waiting for the right season. Aldridge came back 2 weeks before Helena. He came alone this time, no marshals, just him and his leather folio and his ink-stained fingers, and he sat at Caleb's table and laid out what the federal case looked like and what Emma was going to face. Vance's lawyers are good, he said. The best money buys. They're going to try to establish that the letters were written in good faith and that Vance had no knowledge of Bell's intentions. Bell didn't have intentions, Emma said. Vance had intentions. Bell was the instrument. That's exactly what they're going to dispute. Then dispute it back, Caleb said. Aldridge looked at him. Mr. Stone, with respect, Vance's handwriting is in those letters, Caleb said. The same handwriting is on the letterhead. The same educated hand that a man who signs bills with an X didn't write. He leaned forward. Bell's going to testify that Vance wrote those letters. We've got a handwriting examiner coming from Bozeman. Aldridge paused. You hired a handwriting examiner. Emma suggested it. I paid for it. Aldridge looked at Emma. When? He said. 3 days after we got back from Bozeman, Emma said. I wrote to the territorial court in Helena and asked who they used. They sent me a name. She folded her hands. I've also written to 4 of the families on Bell's list and asked them to save any documents, any receipts, any notes, anything in writing from Vance's people. 3 of them wrote back. Aldridge sat back in his chair. How was doing the thing he'd done in his office in Bozeman, recalculating. Looking at her like an equation that had given him a different answer than he expected. Mrs. Stone, he said, have you considered law? I've considered surviving, Emma said. This is what that looks like. He almost smiled. The handwriting examiner is good work. The family documents are excellent. He looked at his folio. There's one more thing I need to tell you, and it's going to change the shape of what you testify to. Emma went still. Midland Pacific Consolidated, Aldridge said. We've been pulling at that thread the way you suggested. It goes further than we thought. How much further? The syndicate has been operating in 6 territories: Wyoming, Colorado, Idaho, Oregon, Dakota, and Montana. What Vance was doing here, the mail order scheme, the fraudulent deeds, the land-water manipulation, it's not his idea, it's a playbook. He opened the folio. We found documentation of at least 4 other women brought in the same way. Different states, different men playing the Bell role, same letters, same handwriting. Emma heard it land. The same letters. He did this before, she said. At least 4 times that we can document, possibly more. And the other women. 2 signed the deeds before they understood what they'd done. 1 disappeared we don't know where. 1, Aldridge paused. 1 fought back. In Colorado 3 years ago. She went to the county sheriff. He was on Vance's payroll. She was removed from the county. Emma's hands went flat on the table. Removed, she said. She was told to leave. She left. His voice was careful. We're trying to find her. Her name was Clara Jennings. And the women who signed, they're entitled to restitution. If we can prove the fraud, which we can now the deeds are void, the land goes back. He looked at her. But for that to happen, Mrs. Stone, the case has to be airtight. And the thing that makes it airtight is you. The room was very quiet. Because I didn't sign, Emma said. Because you didn't sign, and because you kept every letter, and because you walked into my office before Vance knew what was happening. He closed the folio. You are the only woman in 6 territories who has a complete record of the approach, can testify to its mechanics, and is still in a position to stand up in a federal courtroom and say what it was. Caleb put his hand on the table beside hers. Not on it. Beside it. Letting her choose. She put her hand on his. 6 territories, she said. Yes. Then I'd better be good in Helena. You will be, Aldridge said. You've been good at everything else. The night before they left for Helena, Emma went down to the creek. She heard Caleb come behind her, and she didn't turn around. She stood at the edge of the water, where it ran fast and cold and green over the stones, and she listened to it. Go, and she thought about what it meant to own something like this. Not own it the way Vance meant it, not the dollar amount of it, not the leverage of it. Own it the way her father had owned his 400 acres, by knowing every inch, by caring what happened to it in a dry year, by putting your name on it because you intended to stay. Is that it? She said. Yes, ma'am. The cottonwood. 40 feet tall easy. Its roots down in the bank like hands holding on. He planted it when he filed the claim, Caleb said, coming up beside her. 1861. I used to think about how old I'd be when it was full grown. He looked up into the canopy. Turns out you don't know what full grown means when it's a tree. It just keeps going. Emma stood under it and put her hand on the bark. 30 years of this valley. 30 years of spring flood and summer dry and the creek going high and the creek going low, and always the tree, always the roots, always the water moving past. Caleb. Emma. I want to plant something when we get back from Helena. What kind? I don't know yet. Something that takes a long time. She turned to look at him. Something our children will wonder about. How old it is. Who put it there? The word landed between them. Children. Neither of them had said it. Caleb looked at her for a long moment in the late light, and she watched something in his face that was not hope. Exactly. Hope was too small a word, but something that had come back from a very long way away and was standing at the door again. Whatever you want to plant, he said. I want you to plant it with me. He reached out and tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. His hand stayed there at the side of her face, and he looked at her the way he'd looked at her in the church doorway, and at the wagon wheel, and in his kitchen in the rain, like a man who kept surprising himself. Emma Rose Stone, he said. That's me. I want to say something. Say it. I think I... He stopped, started again. I know it's only been... Caleb. What? I know, she said. I know what you're trying to say. I've known it since the North Pass. He went still. You could have said something, he said. So could you. He looked at her. She looked back. I love you, he said. That's the thing I'm trying to say. Not because you saved the land. Not because you're brave or smart or stubborn, though you are all those things. Because I went 11 years not feeling like this. And then you came up a mountain in the rain, and I've felt like this every day for 3 weeks, and I am 40 years old, and I don't intend to waste any more time being careful about it. Emma's eyes stung. Caleb Stone. Emma. You have terrible timing, she said. We leave for Helena at dawn. I know it. And you're making me cry. I know that too. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. She put her hand over his at her cheek. I love you too. I've been loving you since you took your hat off in the rain. She swallowed. That was the moment. A man who takes his hat off in a downpour for a woman he's never met. There's something in a man like that. It's just manners, he said. No, Emma said. It's not. It's a whole life of what kind of man you are. It's every fence post and every year on this mountain. It's the way you stood behind a crowd and then chose not to stand there anymore. His forehead came down to hers. I stood behind the crowd, he said. And then you didn't. That's the part that matters. She turned her face up. The second choice is always the one that counts. He kissed her there at the water under the cottonwood his grandfather planted with the creek running past them, and Helena 2 days away, and 6 territories worth of women who needed her to stand up in a federal courtroom and tell the truth. She kissed him back. They found Ezra on the porch when they came back up from the creek. He was pretending to whittle, which was his method of being somewhere without being asked why, and he did not look up when they came through the gate. "Beautiful evening," he said. "It is," Emma said. "Creek's running good." "It is." "Trees looking healthy." "Ezra," Caleb said. "What?" "We're leaving before first light. You'll need to move the cattle out of the north pasture Thursday, or the grass'll be stripped." "I know when to move a cattle," Ezra said. "I've been moving cattle on this ranch since before you were born." "I know it." "Then stop telling me things I know and go get some sleep." He looked up then finally, and his eyes went to Emma's face, and whatever he saw there made something happen in his that he covered up quick by looking back at his whittling. "Both of you." "Ezra," Emma said. "Ma'am." "Thank you." He looked up again. "For what?" "For the cloth on the table," she said. "That first night, the wildflowers." He was quiet a moment. "My wife used to put flowers on the table," he said. "Every Sunday. Didn't matter if they were weeds from the ditch. She put something green and growing on the table every Sunday of our married life." He looked at his hands. "She's been gone 19 years. I stopped doing it because there wasn't anyone to do it for." Emma went up the step and put her arms around the old man and held on. High made a sound that might have been surprise, and might have been something else entirely. And after a moment, his arms came up, and he held her back stiffly, like a man who had been careful a long time, and was not sure how much careful he had left in him. "Thank you for the flowers," Emma said again. "Go to bed," he said gruff into her hair. "Go to bed before I embarrass myself." She let go. She went inside. Caleb stood on the step a moment. He looked at Ezra. "She planted something in me," Ezra said before Caleb could speak. "The minute I laid eyes on her." He didn't look up. "Go on. She's waiting." Caleb went in. Ezra sat on the step in the dark for a while after, with his whittling in his lap, and the summer night all around him, and the creek running somewhere below in the dark. And he put his face up to the air coming down off the mountain, and let it sit on him. He was thinking about a woman who put flowers on a table every Sunday. He was thinking about how a house fills differently when the right people are in it. He was thinking, though he would not have said this to anyone, that this was what he'd been watching for. Not the land case, not the federal warrant, not even the kiss in the street that the whole town was still talking about. This, the creek running, the light in the window, the sound of two people moving around in the same kitchen the way people do when they've stopped being careful with each other. I went inside. He put the whittling away. He went to bed and slept better than he had in 11 years. In the morning early before the sun, Emma came downstairs to find a jar on the kitchen table. Wildflowers, cut fresh, still dark with dew. No note. No word from Ezra, who was already out at the barn. Emma stood at the table in the gray early light and looked at those flowers for a long time. Then she put her hand on them, just her hand flat on the jar, feeling the cold glass, the alive stems inside, and she thought about how far she had come. 1,100 miles on a broken seat to a town that handed her back like a wrong order. And here she stood, in her own kitchen, with her husband's horse saddled in the yard, and a federal case to make, and a valley at her back, and flowers on the table. She picked up her coat. She walked out into the beginning of the day. Helena was bigger than Emma expected, and louder than she wanted. 2 days on the road had given her time to think, which was either the best or worst preparation for a federal courthouse, and she hadn't decided which. Caleb rode beside her the whole way close enough that their horses occasionally bumped shoulders, and he talked when she wanted to talk, and went quiet when she needed quiet. And by the time they rode into the territorial capital, she understood that this was his particular gift, the ability to be fully present without taking up too much room. The courthouse was a brick building on the main street that smelled of paper and pipe tobacco, and the particular dry heat of a room where serious things happened regularly. A clerk met them at the door and told Emma she'd be the third witness called on the morning of September the 4th, which was tomorrow, and that Vance's lawyers had filed 3 motions that morning, and all 3 had been denied. "What motions?" Emma said. The clerk looked nervous. "Ma'am, I'm not sure I should—" "What motions?" Caleb said. Quieter, more final. The clerk cleared his throat. They filed to have your letters ruled inadmissible as hearsay. They filed to have Bell's testimony excluded on grounds of his criminal cooperation arrangement. And they filed to have the handwriting examination results suppressed pending an independent review. Emma took that in. All three denied, she said. All three, yes, ma'am. Judge Whitmore ruled this morning. She looked at Caleb. He looked back. They're scared, he said. Scared men with good lawyers are the most dangerous kind, she said. Yes, ma'am. But scared is still scared. Aldridge found them at the hotel that evening. He had the look of a man who had been awake for 2 days and intended to stay awake 2 more. He sat down across from Emma and put a new folder on the table and kept his hand flat on it for a moment before he opened it. I need to tell you something before tomorrow, he said. Tell me. We found Clara Jennings. Emma went very still. The woman from Colorado, she said. The one who fought back. Yes. Aldridge opened the folder. She's in Cheyenne. She's been there 2 years working in a dry goods store under a different name. When we told her what happened here, what you did, she agreed to come. He looked up. She arrived in Helena this afternoon. She's here, and she wants to testify, but... He paused. Her testimony is going to be harder to hear than yours. What happened to her in Colorado was... He stopped. Started again. Vance's operation didn't start gentle. By the time you arrived in Red Hollow, he'd refined the method. The early version was rougher. Emma kept her face steady. What did they do to her? Kagan, Aldridge said. Before he came to Montana, he ran her off her claim with 2 men and a lit torch. She lost her house and everything in it, and she was told that if she spoke about it, she'd lose more. The table was quiet. Caleb said, and she's still willing to stand up. She's more than willing, Aldridge said. She's been waiting 2 years for someone to open a door. He looked at Emma. I told her you opened it. She asked me to tell you that. Emma pressed her hand flat on the table. A woman she had never met. A woman who had carried a burned house and 2 years of silence across 2 territories and was sitting somewhere in Helena right now because Emma Rose Whitaker had kept her letters tied with a blue string in a suitcase on a stagecoach. Can I see her? Emma said. Tonight if you want. I want. Clara Jennings was 32 years old and had the kind of face that has been through weather, not hard, not bitter, but changed. Marked the way wood is marked when it's been in water and dried again. There was a quality to her stillness that Emma recognized, the particular stillness of a person who has learned to take up as little space as possible. Emma recognized it because she'd felt it herself. Standing at a fence gate in Nebraska with a letter in her hand and very little left to lose, they sat in the hotel parlor with no one else around, and for a while they just looked at each other the way women look when they have the same story under the surface. He wrote you letters too, Emma said. 14, Clara said. I kept 12. The other 2 I burned because I was ashamed. Her jaw tightened. I spent a long time being ashamed. I know that feeling. Then they told me what you did with yours. Clara looked at her hands. 19 letters. All 19. She looked up. Why didn't you burn any of them? Emma thought about it honestly. My father taught me never to destroy something until you understand it, she said. I didn't understand those letters until I read them the 3rd time. She paused. And by then I was already angry, and angry people tend to preserve evidence rather than burn it. Clara made a sound that was half laugh and half something else. I wish I'd been angrier, she said. You're here, Emma said. That's angry enough. Clara looked at her for a long moment. Are you scared? She said. For tomorrow? Yes, Emma said. You. I've been scared every day for 2 years, Clara said. I think I've used up my scared. She straightened in her chair. I think tomorrow I'm just going to be a woman who tells the truth. Emma reached across the small table and put her hand over Clara's. Then that's what we'll both be, she said. The courtroom was full. Emma had not expected that. She had expected lawyers and a judge and the formal machinery of the territorial law, and those were there. But the benches were also full. Martha Harmon was in the third row with her boys, scrubbed clean beside her. Pyle, the hotel clerk, was in the fifth row with a leather folder on his knees. Hattie Mercer sat in the sixth, with her hands folded and her back straight as a fence post. Greer, the rancher, was there, and the two women from the church circle, and three men. Emma recognized from the crowd the day she arrived in Red Hollow and had never learned the names of. Vance sat at the defendant's table with two lawyers and the same pleasant folded hands expression he'd worn in every room Emma had ever seen him in. He looked at her when she came in. He smiled, small, measured, calibrated, and she met his eyes and did not look away until he did. He looked away first. Caleb was in the second row behind the railing. He had his hat in his hands, and he looked at her when she came through the door, and he held her eyes until she sat down, and she thought not for the first time that there are ways of saying things that have nothing to do with words. Judge Whitmore was a broad-faced man with white side whiskers, and the manner of someone who had sat on a bench long enough to be unsurprisable. He called the room to order with a single crack of the gavel and looked at both tables and said, "Let's not waste the court's time," which Emma took as a good sign. The federal prosecutor was a young man named Garrett Cole, who had sharp eyes and a quieter voice than she expected. He called Bell first. Thomas Bell walked to the stand, looking smaller than he had in Red Hollow. The street had given him somehow the crowd, the storefronts, the familiar ground. In a courtroom, he was just a man with ink-stained fingers who had made a bad agreement and was now explaining it to strangers under oath. He told it plain. To his credit, he didn't minimize his own role, and he didn't dress it up. He'd been in debt. Vance had come to him. He'd agreed to be the face of a plan that was not his plan, that he had not fully understood at the beginning and had understood too well by the end. "Mr. Bell," Cole said, "in your own words, what was the purpose of bringing Miss Whitaker to Red Hollow?" "To get her signature," Bell said, "on a deed, to the Stone Creek water rights." "And why was a woman's signature specifically required?" "Territorial law. A husband can't deed property without the wife's consent. Vance needed a Mrs. Bell." "And when you saw Miss Whitaker step off the stagecoach?" Bell's ears went red. "I panicked," he said. I thought she'd ask too many questions. She had a look about her." He paused. "A look like she'd already seen through things. And I sent her away." "That decision," Cole said, "turned out to be consequential." "Yes, sir, it did." Vance's lawyer went after Bell hard on cross. He was a man named Dressler, who wore excellent suits and had the manner of someone born certain he was the smartest person in any room. He picked at Bell's credibility for 30 minutes, the debt, the deal, the cooperation agreement, the fact that Bell was testifying in exchange for consideration. He made Bell small again, by degrees the way a good lawyer can. But Bell held to the central facts. He said them 5 times in 5 different ways, and they stayed the same each time, which was the only thing that mattered. When Bell stepped down, Clara Jennings went up. The room changed when she walked to the stand. Something shifted in the benches in the jury box in the air. Clara Jennings walked to that chair the way Emma had said she would, like a woman who had used up her scared. She told what happened in Colorado in 1881, in a level voice that did not waver and did not perform. She said what Kagan's men had done. She said what she had been told. She said the name of the county sheriff who had turned her away. She said the name of the Midland Pacific representative who had been present when it happened. She said all of it. And when Dressler rose for cross-examination, she looked at him with the eyes of a woman who had nothing left to be frightened of, and he sat back down after 4 questions and said, "No further inquiry." Martha Harmon reached over and took the older of her 2 boys by the shoulder. Hattie Mercer put her hand over her mouth. Caleb sat in the second row, with his hat in his hands and his jaw set, and Emma saw his eyes go to Clara Jennings and stay there with something in them that was not grief exactly, but lived near it. Emma was called after the noon recess. She walked to the stand, and she sat down, and she looked at the room, at all of it, at Vance with his pleasant hands, and his good lawyers at Bell with his red ears, and his conscience at Clara in the third row, and Caleb in the second, at Martha Harmon, and Hattie Mercer, and Pyle, with his folder at Judge Whitmore, with his unsurprisable face. She thought about her father. She thought about what he had said dying. A strong person can lose everything and still stand. She straightened her spine. Mrs. Stone, Cole said, please tell the court how you came to be in Red Hollow, Montana territory on the 15th of July, 1884. Emma put her hands flat on her knees. I answered an advertisement, she said, for a mail-order bride. I received 19 letters over 7 months from a man who signed them Thomas Bell. I came to Montana in good faith on those letters to be married. She looked at Vance. The letters were not written by Thomas Bell. They were written by Harlan Vance. I can establish this through the handwriting examination you've already received, through one letter that contained a partial letterhead for the Red Hollow Land and Water Company, and through the testimony you've already heard, and the purpose of bringing you to Montana. To put my signature on a deed transferring Stone Creek water rights to a Wyoming shell company, acting on behalf of Midland Pacific Consolidated. And when Thomas Bell declined to go through with the arrangement, he sent me away in the street, Emma said, in front of 26 people, without funds, without a place to stay, without a soul in the territory who knew my name. A beat. Which turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me, because it meant I didn't sign anything. She heard a sound in the benches, not a laugh, something more complicated. Cole walked her through the letters. All 19. He had them in order, and he handed each one to her, and she identified each one and quoted the relevant passages from memory, because she had read them so many times that they lived in her, the way prayers live in a person who has said them long enough. At letter 14, the survey referenced the section and quarter. Whitmore leaned forward. Mrs. Stone, the judge said, you're quoting this from memory. Yes, Your Honor. The entire letter. The relevant sections. I've read them enough times. He looked at her over his spectacles. Continue, he said. Dressler came for her on cross the way she'd known he would. How was precise and he was good. And he tried 6 different approaches in the first 10 minutes, the way a man tries different keys on a lock. He tried to establish that the letters could have been written by any educated man in the territory. He tried to suggest that Emma had misunderstood their content due to her emotional investment in the situation. He tried delicately carefully to imply that a woman who had married a man she'd known for 6 days was perhaps not the most reliable evaluator of intent. Emma answered every question. Clearly. Directly. Without anger, without apology, without the kind of careful hedging that sounds like uncertainty. On the emotional investment approach, she said, Mr. Dressler, I was in love with 19 letters written by a man I'd never met. That is correct. The love was genuine. The letters were fraudulent. I know the difference between those two facts. On the handwriting question, she said, I'm not the one who established the handwriting match. A trained examiner from the territorial court in Helena did that. My contribution was keeping the letters. You're welcome to cross-examine the examiner. On the marriage, Dressler paused and then said very carefully, Mrs. Stone, you married Mr. Stone within 6 days of arriving in this territory under what I might characterize as unusual circumstances. Mr. Dressler. Emma looked at him steadily. Are you asking me about my marriage? I'm establishing. My husband is sitting in the second row, Emma said. He is a man who stood up in a street in front of everyone who had just watched me be publicly humiliated and put his name next to mine so that the same people couldn't do it again. If you'd like to characterize that as unusual, I'm willing to let the court form its own opinion. Somewhere in the benches, someone made a sound. Whitmore's mouth did something at the corner. Dressler changed direction. He tried once more the last angle, the most dangerous one. Mrs. Stone, you testified that you walked into Commissioner Aldridge's office in Bozeman with this evidence. You made no stops. You spoke to no one. Is that correct? Correct. And yet you had time on the road to read and memorize 19 letters. I'd already memorized them, Emma said. I read them on the train coming out, on the coach, on the first night in Red Hollow when I couldn't sleep. I knew them before I knew they mattered. Convenient. No, sir. Emma's voice came out quiet and final. It's what women do when they're alone and scared and have nothing but a stack of letters between them and a town that's already decided what they are. They read them. They memorize them. They hold on to every word because words were all they were given. She paused. That's not convenient. That's surviving. The courtroom was completely silent. Dressler looked at her for a long moment. No further questions, he said. Whitmore recessed for 1 hour. Emma came out of the courtroom, and Caleb was in the hallway, and she walked straight to him and put her forehead against his chest, and his arms came around her, and she stood there just for a minute and let herself be held. "You were," he started. "Don't," she said. "Not yet. Just a minute." He went quiet. She felt his hand at the back of her head. She breathed. Clara Jennings passed them in the hallway and touched Emma's arm as she went by light, just a hand for a second, and Emma felt it all the way down. Martha Harmon came out with her boys, and the older one said in a clear, carrying child's voice, "Mama, is that the lady who saved our barn?" And Martha said, "She's the lady who saved a lot more than that," and kept walking. Emma lifted her head. "Caleb." "Emma. Whatever he rules, he's going to rule the right way," Caleb said. "You don't know that." "I know it." "How?" "Because you just did that in there," he said, "and I've been watching you for 7 weeks, and every single thing you've set out to do, you've done, and I'm not starting to doubt you now." She looked up at him. "I love you," she said. "I know it," he said. "I love you too. Go sit down before your legs give out." She laughed. Her legs were fine. She went and sat with Clara on a bench in the hallway, and they sat shoulder to shoulder the way women sit when they've been through the same thing and don't need to explain it. "What do you do?" Emma said. "In Cheyenne, at the dry goods store." "Keep accounts," Clara said. "I'm good with numbers, always have been." She paused. "I've been saving. I want land again. I know that sounds—" "It doesn't sound like anything except exactly right," Emma said. Clara looked at her. "How do you do that?" she said. "Just say the thing." "My father," Emma said. "He always said if a thing is true, say it plain and save everyone the time of working around it." "Smart man." "Best I ever knew." She paused. "Until recent." Clara smiled. It was the first time Emma had seen her smile, and it changed her whole face. "He's something," Clara said. "Your husband." "He is. The way he looks at you." "I know. I want that someday," Clara said, not wistfully, practically. The way a woman says she wants a piece of land because she means it and she intends to work for it. "You'll have it," Emma said. "You're 32 years old, and you just testified in a federal courtroom in a room full of strangers. You'll have whatever you decide to go after." Clara was quiet a moment. "You sound very sure of that." "I'm sure of you," Emma said. "I've known you 24 hours, and I'm sure of you." The bailiff opened the door. "Court's reconvening," he said. Whitmore took his seat. He looked at both tables. He looked at the room. He put his papers in order with the unhurried precision of a man who knows he has the last word and doesn't need to rush toward it. In the matter of the United States versus Harlan Vance and associated parties, he said, "This court finds the evidence presented sufficient to sustain charges of land fraud conspiracy and criminal coercion across the Montana Territory." He looked at his papers. "Furthermore, on the basis of the testimony and documentation presented, this court issues a finding to be forwarded to the federal prosecutor's offices in Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, and Oregon, recommending inquiry into the activities of Midland Pacific Consolidated in those territories." He looked up. "All deeds and land transfers executed under fraudulent pretense, as identified in the Commissioner's report, are hereby voided. The relevant land parcels are to be returned to their original owners of record." He looked at Vance. "Mr. Vance, this court finds you in violation of federal land statutes conspiracy to commit fraud and criminal coercion. You will be remanded to federal custody pending sentencing." He looked at the lawyers. "Counsel, any questions about the ruling?" Dressler started to rise. "Sit down, Mr. Dressler," Whitmore said pleasantly. "I've read your motions. I've denied your motions. The ruling stands." Dressler sat down. Whitmore looked out at the room. "One more thing," he said. "This court would like to note for the record that the evidence in this case was preserved and presented by a private citizen, Mrs. Emma Rose Stone, of Stone Creek Ranch, Montana Territory." Without her diligence and her willingness to testify, this fraud would have continued across multiple territories. It is the opinion of this court that she is owed a significant debt by every person whose land was protected as a result. He looked at Emma directly. The court thanks you, Mrs. Stone. Emma sat with it, the formal words of a federal judge landing on her name, on the name she had almost not had. Thank you, Your Honor, she said. He cracked the gavel. Court is dismissed. The sound that came up in that room was not a cheer. It was deeper than a cheer, more human. It was the sound of people who had been holding their breath for a long time, all letting it go at once, and it moved through the benches like water, and Martha Harmon had her boys by their shoulders, and her face was doing three things at once, and Pyle had his hand over his eyes, and Hattie Mercer was standing up very straight, with her chin at a particular angle that Emma had come to understand meant she was not going to cry in public, and was exerting considerable effort toward that end. Caleb got over the railing before the gavel finished echoing. He had her hands. He was looking at her face the way he always looked, thorough, quiet, seeing more than he said. Well, he said. Well, she said. Ready to go home. More than I have ever been ready for anything in my life. He kept her hands. Emma. Caleb. I want to say something. You keep saying that and then actually saying it, she said. It's a fine habit. Go ahead. He looked down at their joined hands for a moment. When I was 24 years old, he said, I went into a river after someone I loved, and I came up alone, and I decided that was the price of loving something too much. He looked up. I decided the mountain was safer. The fence posts were safer. The cattle and the creek and the work were safer. His thumbs moved across her knuckles. And then you showed up in the rain, and you were the least safe thing I'd ever met in my life, and I could not for the life of me make myself send you away. Emma's eyes were full. I'm glad, she said. I'm very, very glad. I spent 11 years building a ranch, he said. You spent 1,100 miles building a life. I think what we're building now is better than either one. She put her free hand against his jaw. It is, she said. It's considerably better. He pulled her in and held her right there in the middle of a Helena courtroom, with half of Red Hollow watching, and Judge Whitmore's bailiff, pretending to organize papers he'd already organized. Clara Jennings stood at the end of the row with her hands together watching. And Emma, with her face against Caleb's collar, saw her over his shoulder. She reached one hand out. Clara looked at it. She took it. The three of them stood there for a moment. A woman from Nebraska, a mountain cowboy who'd stopped hiding, and a woman from Colorado who'd been waiting 2 years for a door to open. And outside the courthouse, Helena went on being loud and indifferent and alive the way cities are when something that matters is happening inside a building on a side street. 3 days later, they came back over the North Pass into the Red Hollow Valley. Ezra was on the porch. He stood up when he saw the wagon. He read their faces. He sat back down. Coffee's hot, he said. Ezra, Caleb said. He's in federal custody. All 6 families are getting their land back. Emma testified, and the judge thanked her by name on the record. Ezra looked at Emma. By name, he said. By name, she said. He was quiet for the moment. Well, he said, I made a pie. Emma climbed down off the wagon. Both sides even this time, she said. I'm an old man, Ezra said, not a dead one. She went up the step and kissed his cheek, which made him sit down very fast and look at his hands. Go on inside, he said gruffly. It's getting cold. It was 70 degrees. Emma went inside. That evening after supper, Emma took the 19 letters out of her coat pocket. She carried them down to the creek. She stood under the cottonwood with the water running fast below her, and the last of the summer light coming through the leaves, and she held the letters in both hands, and she thought about the woman who had packed them in a suitcase in Nebraska, and tied them with a blue string, and carried them 1,100 miles, believing they were the shape of her future. That woman had been right, just not in the way she'd thought. She looked at the letters a long time. Then she put them back in her coat. She kept them, not because she needed them anymore, not because of what they'd done, The case was made. The deed was voided. The man was in custody. The families were going home. She kept them because they were hers. Every word that had been used against her had become in her hands the thing that undid the person who wrote them. That was worth keeping. That was worth remembering. Caleb came down and stood beside her. "I thought you might burn them," he said. "I thought about it." "What stopped you?" Emma looked at the creek. "My father told me never to destroy something until you understand it," she said. "I understand them now." She put her hand against the cottonwood bark. "But I also figure if Midland Pacific has people in 6 territories, there might be other women, other letters, other cases that need this one to stand on." He was quiet. "You're going to keep doing this," he said. "Aren't you?" It wasn't quite a question. "Aldridge asked me to consult on 2 other cases that look similar," Emma said. "I told him I'd need to think about it. And I've thought about it. And," she looked at him, "I need a husband who's all right with his wife going to Bozeman when the law needs her." Caleb looked at the creek for a long moment. He looked at the cottonwood his grandfather planted. He looked at Emma Rose Stone, who had come to this valley with 2 dresses and a family Bible, and 19 fraudulent letters, and had, in the space of 1 summer, changed the shape of everything. "I'm all right with it," he said. "You sure?" "I'll ride with you," he said. "Every time." She leaned against his shoulder. "Ezra's going to complain," she said. "Ezra's going to brag to every person who comes up this mountain," Caleb said. "He's already told the 3 neighbors about the congressional inquiry. He's got it a little wrong. He thinks you're personally going to Washington." "I might be," Emma said. He looked at her. "I might be," she said again more quietly. "Aldridge said there's a senator who wants to hear about Midland Pacific. He said a woman who can testify to how the scheme worked from the inside. Emma, it's a long way off. Might not happen. But it might." "Yes." He laughed. The good laugh, the one from the chest, the one she'd been collecting since she first heard it. "My grandfather," he said, "filed a water claim in 1861 because he wanted a piece of land to work and a creek to water it with." He shook his head slowly. "He'd have no idea what to make of any of this. He'd make the same thing he made of the land," Emma said. "He'd figure out how it worked, and he'd put his name on it, and he'd stay." Caleb looked at her. "Yes," he said. He would. The creek ran on. The cottonwood stood. The light came down through the leaves the way it does in Montana, in late summer gold and long and certain, the kind of light that doesn't apologize for being beautiful. Emma Rose Stone stood under her husband's grandfather's tree, on land that had been tried and tested and held. And she felt not the careful, guarded, one day at a time kind of okay, that had carried her through 1,100 miles and 1 bad Saturday and 6 weeks of federal law, but something larger and less careful. She felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, not because she had been brought here, not because a man had chosen her, or a judge had thanked her, or a valley had finally seen what she was worth. Because she had chosen this, every step of it. From the moment she set her suitcase down in the middle of Red Hollow's dusty street and did not pick it back up until she was ready. She had chosen to stay. She had chosen to fight. She had chosen the mountain cowboy who took his hat off in the rain, and she had built out of 19 lies and 1 bad Saturday and 1 very good man and an old cowhand with a lopsided pie. Something that no one could hand back to her. Something with her name on it. Something that was entirely, finally hers. Caleb put his arm around her. Emma leaned into him, and the valley that had tried to break her held them both that evening in the long gold light of a summer that had changed everything, because Emma Rose Stone had come 1,100 miles with nothing but the truth, and the truth, it turned out, was more than enough.